Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming to the USJI Symposium titled Japan as a Tourism Nation, What Kyoto Can Do. Thank you very much for gathering in spite of the cold weather. If I may introduce myself, I am Operating Advisor of USJI and Dean of Graduate School of International Relations of Ritsumeikan University. I am Keiji Nakatsuji. I will be the facilitator for this symposium. Just to remind you, we have a simultaneous translation throughout this symposium today. Channel 1 is Japanese, Channel 2 is English. So please use and set the channel to your convenience. Now we would like to start, first of all, with the opening remarks by Dr. Masako Egawa, Chair of USJI and Executive Vice President of the University of Tokyo. Thank you very much for the kind introduction. I am Masako Egawa. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming to this USJI Symposium titled Japan as a Tourism Nation, What Kyoto Can Do. Especially now that we're in December, I'm sure you're all very busy, but thank you very much nevertheless for coming to the symposium. On behalf of USJI, I would like to greet you with a few words. The USJI, the US-Japan Research Institute, abbreviated as USJI, was founded in April 2009 in Washington, D.C. as a tax-exempt U.S. NPO. It is qualified as a tax-exempt organization. 8 Japanese universities are participating: Kyoto University, Ritsumeikan University, Kyushu University, Keio University, Toshisha University, Tsukuba University, University of Tokyo, and University of Waseda University, 8 of them. And there are 3 missions. First of all, policy recommendations and network building, as well as human resources development in terms of the researchers. Based on the academic research foundation accumulated so far, we are to integrate the pragmatic research with the academic perspectives and to foster mutual understanding between Japan and the United States, and also to build an intellectual community as to provide a new perspective for decision-making for both the political as well as corporate decision-making. Every year, USJI Week are held twice a year in Washington, D.C., and 8 universities will collaborate on that occasion to hold symposia and workshops. Apart from that, we also hold ad hoc symposia and workshop in addition to that. USJI is holding its second international symposium here in Kyoto. The last time was in November 2010, held at the Ritsumeikan University, commemorating the holding of APEC under the title, Can Asia Save the Global Economy? Out of the 8 universities that I have outlined, 3 of them are located here in Kansai, and therefore we do place a great importance on the activities here in Kansai. I believe there is further room for expanding the activities here in Kansai, so I hope that the recognition of the name of USJI would be enhanced with this opportunity. So far, USJI has been engaging with global challenges, focusing mainly on Japan and the United States. This time, we chose the topic of tourism for the symposium because the Japanese government has stated that it is promoting Japan as a tourism-oriented nation, and by 2020 Summer Olympic Games and Paralympic Games to be held in Tokyo, the goal is to increase the number of annual foreign visitors to 20 million. And therefore, as one of the best and well-known cities of global tourist destination, Kyoto, it is most befitting that we discuss the strategy for Japan to become a tourism-oriented nation. And we would like to add the global perspective, inviting members who represent the field of culture and academia, and also adding an overseas perspective. And also with the participation of the member of Kyoto Chamber of Commerce and Industry, who is a supporter of this symposium, I hope we could go into diverse views as to how we take up this challenge. We hope to send out this recommendation to Tokyo as well as to Washington, and hope that the USJI week to be held in Washington, D.C. in February next year will also be a place where we hope to give that message. We are holding this international symposium thanks to great support by various parties. Let me thank the panelists, the speakers, and also the audience for being with us today. As for this symposium, we are being supported by the Kyoto Chamber of Commerce and Industry and the Yomiuri Shimbun Chairman, Mr. Tateishi, and the members of the organizations. Thank you very much for your support. Mayor Kadokawa of the city of Kyoto will give us some greetings after the keynote speeches. I also would like to thank the members of Doshisha University, President Murata, and other members for kindly providing us with this venue today. Professor Uchida and the members of the Secretariat of the USJI and the other members of the 8 universities. Thank you very much for your support. I hope that we would have a fruitful afternoon. Thank you very much for your attention.
Today we have 2 keynote speeches. The first keynote speech is going to be delivered by Professor Seiichi Kondo, visiting professor and faculty of economics of Doshisha University and former commissioner of the Agency for Cultural Affairs. He is going to speak to convey the spirit of the Japan and Japanese people and what should be the advisable tourism nation strategy. Thank you very much. My name is Seiichi Kondo. For about 40 years, I had worked in the Japanese government, including Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and about 20 years I lived abroad. And of course, I have come back and forth between Japan and other countries. And I experienced the time when Japan was present-day China, where we had such a rapid growth, and also the time of Japan where we suffer serious stagnation like the recent years. And what I have seen and experienced in the past through such ups and downs, I think, is the basis of what I'm going to speak about today. And I'm indeed delighted and honored to be able to deliver a keynote speech in this symposium organized by USJI. I have about 30 minutes for my keynote speech. But toward the year 2020, the year for Tokyo Olympics and Paralympics, the Japanese government had set a goal to increase the number of foreign visitors to 20 million. What can be done, and what are the most important things for us to do in order to realize such a goal? And what are the important points we shouldn't forget? Today we are here in Kyoto, and the theme of this symposium is what can we do in Kyoto. So I'd like to speak something which is really relevant for Kyoto, and also I would like to mention that I have a strong wish to convey the spirit of Japan, the mind of Japan, to the rest of the world. We are close to China and Korea, but still Japan has its own unique spirituality. So for such 20 million visitors from abroad, I hope that we'll be able to convey the unique spirituality of Japan, which is somewhat different from that in China or that in Korea. I would like to use PowerPoint presentation as I go along. Now, 2020 I believe is a hard-to-get opportunity for the Japanese people to convey our spirituality to the rest of the world. And today, Japan has serious difficulties both in political and economic domains. However, the important point is that 100 years down the road, we would like to have historians appreciate Japan as a true big power. And I think we have to go through some perseverance as we try to achieve such a goal. And also, we would like to make sure that Japan will be able to contribute to the major global issues. And such a spirituality or resolve or mindset are what we hope to achieve by utilizing 2020 as a very important hard-to-get opportunity. Then what should we convey to the rest of the world, and how effectively and in what way can we effectively deliver and communicate the Japanese spirituality? Of course, there are many attractiveness such as pop culture, but behind a pop culture there is a essential layers of Japanese culture which we hope will be appreciated by people abroad, and I hope that many more people will make repeated visits to Japan and will then become a sort of ambassadors or evangelists or missionaries who would disseminate the attractiveness and beauty of Japan to other people. And through such an endeavor, we hope that we'll be able to regain the confidence and the pride which Japanese people have somewhat lost in the past few years. What I am going to say may sound a bit nationalistic, but liberal democracy, which is a ultimate important value of the human being, is not functioning pretty well at the moment. And in order for that to gain its full function, I hope that Japanese spirituality will be able to offer something helpful. It's important that many foreign people repeatedly visit Japan. We don't want them to visit Japan just for once and will never come back. We hope that they will come back with many more friends as visitors to Japan after a few years that they visit Japan themselves. And in order for that to happen, I would like to emphasize 3 points: what to convey, and what do we need to show, and what should we do. There are strengths and weaknesses of the Japanese people. Among strengths and beauties, what do we want them to see? And this is something we need to determine. And in order for them to see and experience what we want them to see and experience, what should we do? It shouldn't be just a sightseeing and a tour in Japan. Then, in order for us to make that happen, what should we do? First, what do we want to convey? What do we want to communicate to them? I mentioned the spirituality of the Japanese people, and there are 4 sub-points. One is Japanese view of nature. Human beings are part of the nature. It's most important that we live in unity with nature or in harmony with nature. That is our traditional notion we have nurtured over centuries. And the second is spirituality, mindset. And today, what is visible, like money and material wealth, which can be supported by natural science, have been too much emphasized. In order to supplement them, we believe that spirituality is really important, and I think Japanese people still keep it. And the third point is a sophisticated sense of beauty or aesthetics. For the humankind in the future, we should further refine and develop sense of aesthetics to be more kind to the earth and to be kind to each other. And number 4 is inclusiveness of the Japanese people. We do not make a black and white decision. We have an inclusive attitude which accept diversity. And I think those are the areas where we can make contribution to the rest of the world. Let me give you some specific examples. First, what do we want to show to people from abroad? One is nature in Japan. I believe that the spirituality and the sense of aesthetics of the Japanese people come from our view of nature and nature itself. This is Mount Hiei. When I was at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Japanese government, from Pesantren, which is a Islamic school from Indonesia, about 10 high school teachers were invited to Japan, and they visited the natural science classes in Japanese schools, among many other places. Upon their departure from Kansai Airport, the delegate leader mentioned that it was a wonderful 1 week, and we really appreciate the hospitality by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And he said, we were most impressed by Mount Hiei. That is where deities, gods, and goddesses live. We believe that is the source of Japanese spirituality, and that this is also something we commonly share as Muslims. This word was rather surprising to me. It was a time when the Islamic radicalists were shocking the people around the world. The very pious Muslims, I thought, may look down on the Japanese people who have become quite secular, but it was really contrary to my expectation. They were able to feel Japanese spirituality from Mount Hiei, and they said not a god. He said gods and goddesses, and I believe that Japanese people think that those monotheistic religions are different from the Japanese spirituality, but they were able to feel that in Japan we have a belief in multiple gods and goddesses, and they said that they were impressed by this mountain as the seat to goddesses and gods. A second is a tangible and intangible cultural heritage. They contain so many messages. For instance, this Japanese-style garden, a rock garden. Japanese people believe that human beings are part of the nature, and this is the spirit under which we make such a garden. We make a house and a garden modeling after a natural scenery. On the other hand, in Western traditions, the people seem to believe that the human beings have become superior to the Mother Nature, and as our designing of the garden, they create something artificial as a signage or testimony to the human beings' conquer of the nature. This is quite abstract and artificial, geometrical, with the circles and the straight lines and the square shapes. I like this garden very much, but when I look at this garden for too long, I become somewhat tense, because this is not in harmony with the surrounding landscape. But that is not the case for the Japanese gardens. Such straight lines and circles we see in such a Western garden do not exist in nature. And the direct line is the shortest distance between two points, and a circle is drawn by connecting multiple points which are of equal distance from the center. But those are things which don't exist in nature, but the Japanese people model after what we see in nature in our gardens. And I think that is the difference we see between the Western tradition and the Japanese tradition. We try to be one with nature. And that is also the reason why such Japanese porcelain rakuyaki is distorted. And also the colors, those are not the vivid colors, the intermediate colors. This is a Royal Copenhagen from Denmark, and the difference is so clear. Like the Western garden at the Versailles Palace, a complete circle, perfect circle. And I believe that this is really different from the Japanese emphasis of nature. And another cultural heritage I would like to take note of is a Buddhist shrine. This is Sammon, three gates of Tofuguji Temple. Three gates are what the followers have to go through in order to attain a peace of mind. Kumon, Musomon, and Musakumon gates. Kumon is a gate where we have to realize that there is nothing substantial. Musomon is the gate where we have to realize that we shouldn't be swayed or affected by what is changing. And the third gate is what we have to go through in order to realize that what we desire has no substance. I think all of those are very important. If you look at daily life, you wake up in the morning and you open up the newspapers and you see the differences and changes in the value of yen and value of stock market and the popularity rating of Prime Minister Abe. We are so much affected by what is visible, and we tend to lose sight of what is really important. 800 years ago, a great Buddhist priest has already recognized that those are the things we shouldn't be affected by. This is a painting done by Shoen Uemura, a Meiji era a woman painter, mother and child. A mother, she lost her mother, and that is the time when she painted this painting. I love this painting. And a mother is lovingly looking at the child. That was my rather superficial understanding.
When I traveled to Sendai after March 11, I was on Tohoku Shinkansen, and sitting next to me was a young mother with a baby in her arms, and I started to feel a strong determination coming from that mother. And I looked at her, and she was a very young mother, but she held her baby firmly in her arms. She sat quite straight up, and she was looking at the face of her baby with kindness and care. And I strongly felt her determination that she needed to protect her baby. And then they reminded me of this picture and painting. I believe this mother probably is the most happiest person on earth, being absorbed into looking at her baby's face. And I think that is what true happiness for a human being is. However rich you are, however material affluence you may have, it has nothing to do with fulfilling your lives. I believe this cultural property tells us about that. And I think the value of this painting came to me by encountering the mother and child on Tohoku Shinkansen. So I think that is how the Japanese have been very intent on keeping the spirituality of the Japanese people, and have given great care of such cultural properties. I think in the West, nature was something that you felt superior to as a human being. But I think it was quite the opposite in Japan. We live together with the nature, and I believe this is also expressed in the form of performing arts, like the Noh theater or Japanese dance. These are performing arts where the performer would stand firmly on the floor or on the ground as they perform. But in the West, they would jump from the earth or from the floor into the air, which is somewhat of a resistance against being together with nature. In case of water in Japan, the water falls from the top to bottom, whereas in the West, the fountains will spurt up from the earth towards the sky. And so I hope that the foreign people, when visiting Japan, would realize and come to learn about the mentality of the Japanese people. At the same time, the Japanese people tries to see value in what is not visible. Hasegawa Tohaku's famous painting points to the importance of the blank space between the pine trees. The pine trees is just the cue for giving the message of the painting. What is important is the empty space between the pine trees. And I think the same can be said of sounds. Of course, pause is important for music as well. It's not that you have nothing there when there is a pause. There is something in the pause. So I think that sort of an interval between the notes is also important in music, and it's the same for the Japanese painting and artwork. Also, in terms of what is not visible, we can also think about wind. In other words, you will also find such expressions in the Japanese poems as well. Even though the wind is not visible, you will feel it, and you will feel that the season has changed. So a way of expressing the wind, which is invisible, is shown in this artwork by Katsushika Hokusai. The wind is not visible, and therefore it is expressed by the paper and other things that are blown away by the wind. We, as Japanese, try to give importance to what is not visible, what we cannot hear, and express them in these ways. Thirdly, I want the visitors to appreciate the Japanese people's lifestyles and the national character, which will represent the Japanese spirituality and their views on nature and life and death, which is also expressed here in the form of traditional housing in Kyoto called Kyomachiya, which also is a form of residence that embraces the nature. And by going through these specific values that the Japanese give importance to, I hope that the visitors coming from Japan will appreciate what we think and what our views are. And if our views could be spread more widely in the world, I believe we might have an easier time taking up the challenge of protecting and conserving the global environment. We may be able to have a better balance with science. The fact that the liberal democracy is not working nowadays is because the human beings are forgetful about the caring for others and the spirituality that is required for human beings. We need to bring them back. And also, I think we need to think of things that are not material in nature. We do not like the idea of dualism. That's why sometimes the Japanese people are said to be rather ambiguous in their views. But we don't want to be thinking of things either as black or white at all times. We want to embrace diversity. And I think through various cultural properties, we probably will be able to give that sort of a message to visitors coming to Japan from overseas. That sort of value system, I think, is an idea that is accepted by foreign people as well. This is the quote from Henry Houston, interpreter for Townsend Harris, the first U.S. Consul General to Japan during the Meiji era. He questions Is it all good that the Japanese society is trying to bring in Western values? Isn't that a step towards corruption or immorality, he says. And so that's why I wanted to show you this quote. Also, about 10 years ago, during the Iraqi war, the self-defense forces had been dispatched, and 3 Japanese volunteers were confined by Iraqi armed groups members, and they have issued a statement, that is the group, saying that they had feelings of friendship, respect, and love towards the Japanese. And I think even the terrorists said that they held Japan in respect. I think that is a very important message that we should understand as to how Japan is understood by the world at large. The terrorists freed them ultimately. I don't know why the terrorists added this sentence at the beginning of the statement that they issued, but I think they also held some respect towards the Japanese people and our sense of values and the spirituality that we have held dear to our heart. So, what should we do? What can we do in order to bring out that message? I believe there are several things that I can propose. First of all, I think we should not only try to invite the people to Kyoto when they come to 2020 Summer Olympic Games in Tokyo. I think we need a more proactive approach to send out or create a sort of a tourist package with a message. And also, I think we should add that with well-written descriptions about how we look at the nature and the cultural properties and our lifestyles. The Japanese people may not be so good at communicating in this regard, and therefore I think we should make use of the fans of Japan who are the foreign people living in Japan. And also we have artists in residence like Villa Kujoyama made by Institut Français or the Villa Kamogawa made by Goethe Institute. These facilities are utilized by foreign artists who will absorb the Japanese culture, and when they go back to their own countries, they will be able to send out positive images and messages on Japan. So I think we should try to appeal to the sensibility of the people and the foreign nationals and try to work through sensibility before moving a step further to appeal to their reason. And I think we need to take concrete steps towards that end. At the same time, I believe it is important that we continue to conserve the landscapes, townscapes, and the cultural properties which we have inherited. In the past 10 years or so, unfortunately, Kyoto City has also changed its landscapes somewhat. We are seeing electricity poles and the transmission lines, which are disturbing the natural landscape that we used to enjoy. And therefore, I hope that more care will be given on preserving the traditional landscapes. People are also important. The way we talk, our manners, how we carry ourselves, and the hospitality that we provide to foreign visitors, they also are important in winning the respect of the foreign visitors. I think after March 11, the Great East Japan earthquake, people around the world noted how disciplined the Japanese people were, and I think we should be more strategic to send out a positive message about the good part and good points of Japan and the Japanese culture. By making such effort, I believe we will be able to maintain the modern systems and add to that with spiritual affluence. not only giving importance on capitalism and materialism, we should put a stop to that and try to bring back the world with a little bit more care and understanding of the nature. And I think that it is the opportunity that are going to be provided to us in 2020 when many foreign visitors are expected to come to Japan. We should do our own job in carrying the correct message to the foreign audience and foreign visitors, so that once again we become a country that can shine very brightly as a cultural nation. Taking this opportunity, as we think about the strategy towards becoming a tourism-oriented nation, let us think seriously about what strategy we could work on. With that, I would like to end my speech. Thank you very much.
Well, if I may say, it was a speech full of very fresh sensibility. I have been so much impressed by his understanding of Shoen's art and Mount Hiei. Now I'd like to invite President Koji Murata, President of Doshisha University. He is going to speak under the theme of Kyoto as soft power. President Murata, please. Hey, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am Murata, President of Doshisha University. I thank you very much to USJI to choose our campus for their symposium. And I'd like to take this opportunity to express our heartfelt thanks to all of you who have worked behind the scene to realize this symposium. Now, Kyoto as a soft power. That is the theme I'd like to deal with in my keynote speech. In the world of international politics or international relations, soft power is an expression already well known. But perhaps people in general do not know this expression. This is in contrast with the expression hard power. Hard power is a force to impose something on others. If that is the case, soft power is a power to, or a kind of attractiveness which draws cooperation from others naturally. Sometimes people say that hard power means defense, military, and soft power is culture. But this is not quite right. For instance, economy can be used as a hard power, or it can be used as a soft power also. So I do not know who begins to say, use this expression, soft power, but Dr. Joseph Nye at Harvard University spread the use of this expression, soft power indeed. In the past 20 years or so, soft power has gained its currency around the world. Then why soft power? Why have we begun to use this expression so much? Up until the end of the 20th century, the foreign relationship was organized between two nation states. Military power or the economic power had been used to determine the ranking of the power of nation states. But after the 20th century, no longer the superiority in military or superiority in economics are not the only pieces which make the international relationship between the nation states. Rather, how people recognize the relationship and how to build the relationship, such perceptions are now regarded very important. Constructivism is the word we use in the field of international politics and relationship studies. To recognize other as an enemy, to recognize us a friend, through such a perception of others, constructionism, the relationship is formed. Soft power is the power we use to draw cooperation from other parties through the attractiveness of what we can offer. And also, as was mentioned by Dr. Kondo, in the 20th century, we had these simultaneous terrorist attacks in the United States, and since then, the war against terrorism was regarded very important. But hard power is not effective if that is used alone. Rather, to what extent do we understand the culture and tradition of the parties we are trying to deal with, and overwhelming use of power to bring peace in Afghanistan or in Iran or Iraq may not win the heart and mind of the people who have lived there for centuries. We have to win the trust, heart and mind of the people living in another country. And that means soft power is going to be more important than hard power. And from such a discussion or discourse, public diplomacy also gained currency. Professor Kondo, in his work in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and also in the Cultural Agency of Japan, he really lived through this importance. The diplomacy to work not only on the politicians but also on the people in general in other countries is what has to be achieved through public diplomacy. And in the 21st century, the importance and value of public diplomacy is gaining a lot of attention. If that is the case, public diplomacy or soft power are not areas that are monopolized by the nation states or central government. Many players can be engaged and be important players for soft power and public diplomacy. Such multi-layered structure and multiplicity are very important. In this regard, the cities such as Kyoto are to play an increasingly important role. Just recently, a well-known American political scientist mentioned as follows: if the mayors ruled and governed the world, this is the title of the book he wrote recently. If you look at the history of the global politics, cities were formed before the states. Everything started with a city-state. The sovereign nation states, what we know today, were born at a later time. First, towns and villages were born, and then they grew up to cities. So, in the waves of globalization we see today, national boundaries between nation states have been eroded, and then cities have become many more important players. And this is not something new. Actually, we are returning to the era where cities were more important. In that book, if mayors ruled the world would have become a more peaceful and a more cooperative world. And this is the book which is written by a very famous American political scientist. So in the 21st century, the role of cities have become really crucially important. And as I mentioned some ago, in the last few years, globalization has been part of our daily discourse in our society, and each person like us experiences the forces of globalization in our daily life. Then what is this globalization? This is a big theme, and of course we have to spend a few days of symposium to discuss this fully. But if I may say, not just in Japan, but in the world at large, discussion concerning globalization has not been dealt with in depth. I think it has been taken as just an ostensible phenomenon. There hasn't been a good understanding between the globalization and internationalization. And this is so not only among the people in general, but also in the bureaucrats and politicians. And they speak about globalization, and then they begin to speak in the next phrase, internationalization. So these two words were confused with each other, even by politicians and bureaucrats. And in Japanese universities, globalization is what we need to address. But if you look at around us in campus, there is a center named globalization, and another research institute with the name of globalization. And we are still mixing the meanings of these two words, globalization and internationalization. And I believe that that is exactly the stage where we see ourselves in Japanese society. Then what is the difference between globalization and internationalization? If I may simply put, we can promote internationalization between the two countries, Japan, US, Japan, China, and between uh, Japan and EU. However, what is taking place between the three countries, for instance, is not really a globalization. Globalization is something which is taking place simultaneously all around the world. And the phenomena which is limited to two countries or three countries is not necessarily mentioned as globalization. And also, in internationalization, the central government seems to be playing the role, but in the globalization, national boundaries are being wiped off, and globalization is a trend which cannot be stopped by anyone. So, are we going to see what is taking place as a globalization or as an internationalization? And this really makes a difference about the way governments are engaged in. In the case of internationalization, the central governments perhaps have to play a major role. However, in the case of globalization, perhaps governments should more or less step back and work as more or less a facilitator. And play a side role. So this is not just a difference in words. This is a difference in its essential arena. And if globalization is something that is taking place simultaneously around the world and something that cannot be stopped, then not central government but cities, I believe, are going to be playing more crucial role. So a place like Kyoto will become a more important player in politics, international relations in the world. There are city-to-city diplomacy, city-to-city exchange, and city-to-city competition. And all of those are very interesting. And if you say a city, Richard Florida, a famous American economist, once studied when you look at American cities, New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Chicago, they will continue to grow with vitality. But just recently, Detroit almost went bankrupt economically. Or Pittsburgh, it prospered as a town of steel, but it is now declining. So even big cities, some cities continue to grow, but others begins to lose its vitality and begins to lose competitiveness. The fate of cities differ. Why is that? And Richard Florida, an economist, studied these differences and the reasons why. And his conclusion, simply put, is as follows. A city that can continue to grow is a city which is capable of bringing about innovations. Cities which cannot make innovations, they may succeed and continue to grow when the steel or automobiles are very important. But if they cannot bring about innovation for the future, they will stop growing. So innovation is a very important capacity for a city to continue to grow and prosper. I really agree with that analysis. But then the next question comes. Why a city is able to bring about innovations? Well, another may not be able to bring about innovation. And Florida also gives a very clear-cut answer. The city which can attract talents, artists, or superior engineers, or good managers, or good educators, they may want to live in a certain city. Such a city which attracts such a talent can bring about innovation. The kind of city where such talent do not want to live or do not want to come may not be able to produce innovation. And I really agree with this analysis. And the third question is as follows. Why in a certain city like San Francisco, New York, Los Angeles, or in Chicago, do they receive talents, engineers, artists, educators of excellence? And why a city perhaps like Detroit didn't it happen? Why some cities can draw talents and some cities don't? And Florida has prepared a good answer. That is that depends upon to what extent a city is tolerant of something different or minorities. A city which is tolerant of something different than minorities can draw talents. And when talents are drawn, there will be interesting chemical reactions among people, and then that will give a chance to realizing innovations. So the tolerance, social or cultural tolerance level of a city determines a fate of a city. And this is a study done by him in the United States. How can we indicate the level of tolerance of a city? He has two indicators. One is the population of immigrants, and second is the presence of population of gays. We do not know whether the same thing applies to Japan, but also in Japanese cities, a city which is tolerant of heterogeneity and diversity, which can draw talents, I believe, can become a soft power which is able to bring about lots of innovations.
I have talked about the difference between globalization and internationalization, that fact that not enough debate is on that difference. When we talk about globalization, in the term of globalization, there are different trends that are occurring simultaneously in parallel. I believe there are different vantage points that which we can take. Basically, there are two main trends under globalization which is occurring in parallel. One, as I have discussed the debate of Richard Florida, I think a sense of values which were unacceptable in the past have come to be more acceptable. All the lifestyles which were traditionally not accepted are now more acceptable. Or the minorities who did not have such a big voice in the past are raising their voices. And so it is a horizontal level of globalization that is pervading the world. Roughly speaking, the horizontal globalization, I believe, is the so-called liberal globalization. The globalization as being pursued by the liberal people. Various lifestyles, sense of values are being accepted, with the voice of the minorities being accepted. So that sort of horizontal globalization is occurring. On the other hand, there is another set of globalization occurring, which could be called the vertical level of globalization. So there are various social events taking place around the world which are being ranked based on a single set of criteria. That is the vertical globalization. And therefore, as we look at the tourism city of Kyoto, I believe the mayor might touch upon it later, but this year, Kyoto was ranked #1 as the world leader among tourist destinations. Last year, it was Paris, I believe. So against the European major cities or other tourist destinations around the world, how many visitors they were able to attract, how much spending they were by the visitors. In that ranking, this year, Kyoto became #1 in ranking. Also, in terms of the universities, there is the university ranking of the world as well. So there is the vertical globalization. In other words, rankings are determined according to a single set of criteria. And the horizontal globalization is pursued by the liberal people, and the vertical globalization and maybe more neoliberalist based type of globalization pursued more by the middle-aged people who are more conservative in their thinking. And so we have these two sets of globalization occurring at the same time. And there is a common background to them. In other words, the spread of IT and social networking. In the past, groups which were isolated, the minorities, have become connected by use of IT and social networking. They have gained a place to raise their voice, leading to the horizontal globalization. As for the vertical globalization, universities in Jakarta or in UK and Kyoto, people questioned how are they to be compared with each other. But I think if you look at various aspects and indicators, you are now able to compare these different universities. But these trends of globalization may contradict each other at the same time. As much as you embrace diversity, you come to ranking based on single criteria, and then you lose the diversity on the one hand, and therefore that is a contradiction of each other. So if you look at the attractiveness of the city of Kyoto, Kyoto, as I said, was ranked #1 as a tourist destination, but and so in terms of competitiveness, Kyoto has a lot of competitiveness, and at the same time, it has the diversity of the horizontal globalization, representing various aspects in terms of culture and diversity of values. As Professor Kondo has mentioned, there is the traditional culture and also the religious foundation. However, at the same time, Kyoto is known as the city of universities. The population is 1.45 million, but 10% of the population is university students. If you compare Osaka Prefecture and Kyoto Prefecture, in Osaka there are about 55 universities within the prefecture, and out of the 55, I believe there are about 18 universities within the city of Osaka, but there are 36 universities in Kyoto Prefecture, and within the city of Kyoto there are 38 universities in the city, and therefore in the city of Kyoto there is a large concentration of universities, whereas in case of Osaka Prefecture, the number of universities throughout the prefecture may be larger in number. There is less of a concentration of the universities in the city, which means that there is a lot of exchange among the universities in the city of Kyoto. Among the consortia in the universities, I believe Consortium Kyoto or maybe one of the most successful because this is very much based on the geographical proximity of the universities in the city. And we are able to make use of the competitiveness of the Kyoto-based universities and the diversity of the students who are gathered in the city. Speaking of Doshisha University a little bit, I think people in the audience will know, but we also have a big campus in Kyotanabe. But regarding this Imadegawa campus, we are next to Shokokuji Temple. We are next to the Kyoto Imperial Palace. And also the Reizei family also have their facilities nearby. And yet we are a Christianity-based university, and we have a history of more than 130 years. And this particular location of the Doshisha University, I believe, speaks to the diversity and coexistence of things that are different. In our university, we have many international students attending the university. Especially, we are very proud of the fact that high quality and long-term exchange is the characteristic. Our founder, Joe Nishima, was the first graduate of a university in Japan. He has graduated from Amherst College in the United States and Williams Carleton and the liberal arts colleges that are famous of the United States come to Doshisha under Associate Kyoto Program, AKP, which has already been in place for more than 40 years. 1,300 American students have studied under this program. We have KCJS, Kyoto Consortium of Japanese Studies at Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Stanford, and Michigan. In the large general comprehensive universities, the students come from these universities to study at Doshisha. From 2009, Doshisha has been organizing this. And also with the University of Tübingen in Germany, we have an exchange program for over 20 years. And Tübingen Center is the only university with which we invite the students from them to Doshisha. Also, a similar program is in place with Stanford. And the international students probably come to Doshisha, of course, because of the programs that we excel in. I would like to say that, but probably in addition to that, I think we probably are chosen because we are here in Kyoto. I believe Kyoto, therefore, is able to provide the soft power which attracts people to the city. Another word on the university. In the era of rapid globalization, universities are requested to change. I believe we talk about social partnerships. We also need to work together with the industry and the public sector. The universities cannot remain an ivory tower and be isolated. We are in need of absorbing the needs and the requirement of the industries and the society at large. I bring this up because this is related to Kyoto. One of the major roles that universities play is to engage with the society and collaborate with the society. But even before that, I believe for universities to be universities, we need to be aware of the mission to protect our students. Once we send out these young people to the society, they would have to face the very severe climate of stiff competition. But at least for the 4 years while they are studying at universities, we should provide them with an opportunity to reflect on themselves and to reflect deeply on the society that they may have to be sailing into after graduating from the universities. So a university would need to work together with the society, but at the same time it needs to cut off them from the society while they're in the society. U.S. academic Roti says that the universities should provide a shelter for the students from the society. If they forget this mission, universities will not be able to fulfill their roles. And therefore, at the time, as much as we want to ally with the society and the industries, we need to protect them and provide a shelter space for the students to think and reflect on themselves by cutting them off from the society. We provide the opportunity for encountering diversity here in Kyoto, but at the same time, there needs to be tranquility in Kyoto, and serenity, a place of serenity that leads to deeper reflection. That is the attractiveness of Kyoto. But one of the risks of saying that is that when you pursue serenity and tranquility, you might become self-righteous. You only become self-centered, and you do not see what is happening around you. So serenity, I think, is very much close to parochialness. And therefore, I think you need to be connecting with the society and community, trying to be open, but at the same time to preserve a place for serenity so that you can reflect as to what are the important sense of values. So I think with that, I would like to end my speech on the soft power that I feel Kyoto has. Thank you very much.
最初に申し上げました。
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I work at Ritsumeikan University, and last year for Yae Sato, we were really overwhelmed by Toshisha University, and I really felt directly the great soft power emitted by Mr. President of Toshisha University, Professor Murata. As he mentioned, in order to bring about innovations here in Kyoto, we need to work in collaboration with so many different people, and we need to have more collaboration between Ritsumeikan and Doshisha universities. Now, I would like to invite another person of soft power of Kyoto, Mr. Daisaku Kadokawa, Mayor of the City of Kyoto. Please.
Konnichiwa.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am Kadokawa. Thank you very much for your words. I really feel the soft power. Professor Egawa, Professor Murata, and all of you, thank you very much for your wonderful preparation. Japan as a tourist nation, what Kyoto can do. A wonderful symposium indeed. And thanks to your patronage, Kyoto's tourism is growing. But there are challenges. And given support and advice from you, we would like to continue to play a major role as a tourist city for Japan. Well, this year, the autumnal leaves, the colors of the leaves are so beautiful, almost stunning. Why has it been so beautiful? At the beginning of November, we were a streak of very cold days. And also in summer, we had a lot of rain. Every weekend, we had a very severe rainfall, against which the weather station released alarms. So here in Kyoto and in Japan, we can feel both the beauty and the danger of the nature, and that should lead to the attractiveness and also the strength. Yes, Kyoto is so beautiful with the colors of the leaves, but about a little over 10 years ago, in 2001, we issued a Kyoto's grand plan, master plan. Chapter number 1 is about the way people in Kyoto live. And in our master plan, we really feel that the way we live in Kyoto is really important. One passage goes, and industries and tourism are becoming stagnant, and we are losing universities and industries out of the city center. We see some decline in culture and art. Kyoto is facing a serious crisis. However, over 1,000 years, the way people in Kyoto have lived, if they are cherished and values, we can have a brighter future. In retrospect, I think that we are regaining our vitality. We have put in place and implemented 116 activities for tourism promotion with the backup of citizens. And every year we receive visitors from abroad and from Japan. We implemented a big questionnaire survey on them. 38 or 39 million and 40 million at the time of Osaka's big expo, we were able to exceed such a number of tourists. But last year, we were able to mark 51 million visitors last year. But we shouldn't become a small Tokyo. That's an important slogan. And so we have continued to preserve the landscape and townscape. And of course, we have been given a lot of support from the citizens. Although this must have been a headache for the citizens, we reinforced the height restrictions on the buildings, and also this year for the outdoor billboards, signage of commercial establishments, 23,000, all of them were eliminated from the outdoor. It was a tremendous work for the owners of those establishments, but almost all of them are gone now from the towns. And we once again took questionnaire on visitors from Japan and abroad. We try to improve upon our strength, and we try to eliminate the weaknesses. The most important complaint from the visitors was that the Wi-Fi is not accessible in Kyoto. But now we have about 800 spots, and by the end of this year, we would like to increase the number of spots to 1,500 for Wi-Fi, and also multilingualism on smartphones. If you enter where you would like to go in English, then taking into consideration the traffic jam on that spot, what is the best course or route? to reach that destination, and what are the attractive things you can see in that destination, and what happened in the past. All of those IT improvement have also been made. Last month, we begin to dispatch tourist information in 13 different languages, and we have made so much efforts, including having the overseas offices in 10 countries, including Dubai. And in the next 6 years, we are going to implement and complete 191 tourism measures. This is a big work, but we are sure that we are going to accomplish that. What is important for Japan as a tourism nation? I would like all of you to have a serious discussion on this point. Within the city of Kyoto, those who work in manufacturing, about 30% of them are irregular, atypical workers. For wholesale and retail, 50%. This is about the national average, a bit high because we have a big student population who works on a part-time. However, in the restaurant businesses, 75% of the workers are atypical, irregular workers. And in traditional industries, because of the very difficult building restrictions, those industries are going out of the city, and tourism, on the other hand, is developing. But in Kyoto, we might have the highest number of employees who are irregular part-time workers. So if Japan is going to thrive as tourism as a growth engine, then 75% of the workers being a typical workforce, and young people get married, can they really have a family? In Kyoto, how can we improve the productivity of manufacturing sector, and how can we continue to contribute for the society? That discussion took place in a symposium last year, but we would like you to discuss this point also. Yes, hospitality, omotenashi, is important value, and omotenashi is important for gourmet restaurant industry. What about the floor workers, service people working in restaurants? Your mother is working in a university, your father is working in a big company, and your father is working in an inn, and your mother is working to help as a service woman in a restaurant. Great. They are all the excellent professional hospitality workers. I would like to go to university and become a service worker in a restaurant. I believe that Japan should be a country where those people who work on the floor in tourism industry are really appreciated and well paid. For instance, we can establish a certification program where the helpers and the service servants in restaurants and inns are ranked and also appreciated like a concierge in hotels. Otherwise, Japan and Kyoto cannot thrive as a tourism nation or a city. This is something I would like to learn with you. And for Japan to become a tourism nation, we would like to discuss and hear from you what Kyoto can do and should do. Thank you very much.
Mayor Kadokawa, thank you very much. The latter half of the program will be the panel discussion inviting the distinguished panelists. But before we move on to the panel discussion, we would like to take a 10-minute break.
So we now begin the panel discussion. For this part, Professor Murayama, Vice President of Doshisha University, moderates the session. Thank you very much. My name is Murayama, Vice President of this university. I'd like to ask for your very kind cooperation for the smooth conduct of this discussion. I have been with the business school of Dosha University, where I studied and was engaged in the revitalization of traditional industries in Kyoto. And I think that is the reason why I have been given this task for moderating this panel discussion. Before the break, Japan as a tourism nation, what Kyoto can do, we were able to receive grand speeches by two main speakers and also by a mayor. And in the panel discussion, we have as panelists the people who are really working in the life of Kyoto. And from that point of view, we would like to deepen our discussion concerning Kyoto and tourism. We have wonderful panelists. And to my right, Mr. Masao Hoso, CEO of Hoso Company Limited. And sitting next to him is well known to you, Ms. Madam Yuki Ikenobo Headmaster Designate. And on the other table, Mr. Kazumichi Iwai, Executive Counselor of the Kyoto Chamber of Commerce Industry and Chairman, the President of Hatoya Kanko Company Limited, and Professor Yoshikazu Maegawa, Associate Professor of Graduate School of Management of Kyoto University. And Reverend Daiko Matsuyama, Deputy Chief Priest of Taizoin Temple of Myoshinji. Last but not least, Mr. Geoffrey Wexler, Chief of International Division of Studio Ghibli. So the way we move on with this panel discussion is as follows. Within 10 minutes, each panelist is going to speak. And we have asked them to make a speech on 3 points. One is, what do you think is an essence of what can be shared and appreciated globally among cultural resources of Kyoto? And second, how should we or can we disseminate the charm and attractiveness of Kyoto to the rest of the world? USJI is based in Washington, D.C. in the United States. So I believe that as a second point of discussion, how can we disseminate the attractiveness of Kyoto to the rest of the world is very important. And the third point is, as Japan promotes a tourism promotion strategy, what Kyoto can do, more or less a policy side of the discussion. So first, I'd like to turn to Madam Yuki Ikenobo. 10 minutes. You have the floor.
Thank you very much for the introduction. I would like to talk about what cultural resources we are able to present to the world. I believe any of the resources might do, but I would like to talk about ikebana. As for culture representing Kyoto, I believe each individual expression might be considered as something foreign or different from that of overseas in terms of the shape that it takes. And also the spirit as expressed in the shape, or the philosophy as expressed in the shape or by the shape, may be unique in nature. But at the same time, I think there is something common that is universally appreciated. In case of ikebana, we have these three styles. And by taking a look at this, even if we talk about flowers to express hospitality, there are different ways of arranging the flowers. They are not symmetric. They are asymmetric. There is much abbreviation and omission, which is one sense of beauty typical of Japan. Rikka on the top right is the style which is a way of expressing the wide universe by the flowers. In other words, flower arrangement is not just a way to present the flowers in a beautiful way. The flowers express the great nature. And I think that representation of nature by these flowers may be considered as being interesting. And also, shoka is another style. At the foot of the flower arrangement, it appears as though there is only one stem. As a matter of fact, these initial flowers with only two leaves and a stem, that is expressed in shoka style. And also, when we use trees and flowers, the trees take time to grow. Plants may be annual in nature of growing and withering. So trees would express the perennial nature or the infinity, as well as the plants expressing something shorter in duration. And therefore, it represents the current day and the past at the same time. There are two different arrangements here, which may look quite similar. However, when you place the vase on tokonoma in the Japanese room, depending on from which side the light shines, the arrangement is done differently. In other words, the idea is to arrange the flowers in a way so that they grow towards the light. And therefore, you can see that the flowers are arranged in a different way depending on its or their relationship to the light or the reflection of the light. And I think this reflects the way Japanese people have also live together with nature. And this iris type of a flower called kakitsubata is a flower that flowers throughout the year, but they are not used in the same way. The left-hand side is the summer version. The right-hand side is the winter version. And therefore, of course, we take it for granted that there are 4 seasons in Japan. But depending on which season you are in, you will arrange the flowers in a different way. So I believe that Kyoto is a city which makes you feel the 4 seasons in a quite a striking way. And also, the shape is very interesting. For example, please take a look at the Nijo Castle, which is asymmetric, which is also similarly expressed in the flower arrangement. It is also asymmetrical, which is something natural that we do. But this is something that is unique, and you can feel that asymmetry, especially in Kyoto. We don't express things as is. We omit things and also exaggerate things which you are moved by. I think that is also another sense of beauty. And also, less is more. So we give importance on being simple. Especially the traditional culture in Kyoto, as you look at these different expressions, you can feel the uniqueness as well as the background or the philosophy and the view on nature, which have brought about these specific expressions. Just because they are original and unique, that is not the only characteristic. There is also universality at the same time. For instance, if you go into the next slide, this is a philosophy of Ikebana. Even when withered, flowers are flowers, which means that you praise the flowers in all states. In 1968, when Kawabata Yasunari, the Japanese novelist, became a Nobel laureate for literature, he mentioned that there is the influence of Zen and the Japanese beauty, which was mentioned in his acceptance speech. And also, the Japanese ikebana is not something that the Japanese people appreciate. A German philosopher, Hegel, and Mrs. Hegel appreciated ikebana, or Lafcadio Hearn also talked about the intriguing elements of ikebana. So there are various cultural resources here in Kyoto, but especially there are different spirituality, and the spirituality that supports the different shapes and forms of cultural resources that are identified in Kyoto. They are unique, original, and yet universal in nature. So how do we send out such message from Kyoto to the rest of the world? Kyoto is a place where you see such special qualities in one's everyday life. And I think that is some uniqueness of the city of Kyoto. So I try to have people experience by themselves with their own senses. This is the opportunity to invite foreign guests to experience ikebana. Culture, I think, should not be understood by knowledge alone. I think it is important to feel with your five senses. By doing so, you are able to find the attractiveness as well as difficulties. So I want to provide a relaxing, casual atmosphere for our visitors to experience ikebana. I think it's unfortunate that although Kyoto has such numerous cultural resources and arts and crafts, they are not really utilized in the way of networking. Each individual industry might be trying their best to send out their messages. However, I hope there will be a greater networking. There is insufficiency in building such networking, and therefore I hope that these type of culture experience type of opportunities could be provided more readily in providing hospitality to the visitors. In the overall strategy of tourism, Tokyo is the center of information and politics and economy, but I believe Kyoto is the center of culture and religion. So we may be set in contrast with each other, but I believe we could complement each other on the other hand. So I hope that the true spirit of Japan could be experienced in the daily lives of Kyoto people when people visit Kyoto. And I hope I could do my bit of contribution to foster that sort of a situation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. You have spoken of the essence of Japanese culture in a succinct manner. I have studied and researched traditional industries, and Ikenobo is really at the forefront of globalization. I think I can spend 1 hour talking about this. In countries around the world, Ikenobo has been active in transmitting the art of flower arrangement, Ikenomo. As she said, Ikebana and Zen are related with each other closely. So I'd like to turn to Reverend Matsuyama to discuss Japanese culture in relation to Zen Buddhism. And Reverend Matsuyama is also such a globally active person. He has participated in Davos Forum and more recently for companies' in-house trainings. He talks about Zen Buddhism and Japanese culture. So he is indeed active in broad range of field. Now, Reverend Matsuyama, please. Thank you. The essence of Kyoto, which can be appreciated universally. Right after I come back from Davos meeting, I went to Milan and I had a chance to talk with a Catholic bishop, and he took me to Ambrosiana Library, which is a library with a leading collection of books in Europe. And Reverend Bishop told me as follows: Japan and Italy are very similar. If you look at the world today, Thailand, Indonesia, which are growing and becoming richer, and they are almost overtaking the advanced economies and countries, but there is something they can never catch up with. For instance, this library, he proudly said. For us, we have over 2,000 years of history in Italy, and such area, culture, tradition, and philosophy, the new rising countries cannot catch up with us in such an area. And I agree to what he said on that occasion. The same thing can be said of Kyoto. As Mr. Mayor of the city of Kyoto mentioned, there have been many events that took place in Kyoto. The A-bomb was dropped on Hiroshima, and the big air raid in wartime destroyed Tokyo. And perhaps Kyoto has the longest duration of destruction of the city, starting from Onin strife and the Keicho major earthquake. But for over 1,200 years, Kyoto had survived such major destructions and events of catastrophe. So there has been an accumulation of skills and know-how, expertise, which have sustained our life in Kyoto. And what I think is an essence which can be globally appreciated, and what we have in Kyoto is the discerning eyes the people of Kyoto have, which was cultivated over thousands of years of history. Professor Murata mentioned the city which can innovate itself can grow, and I agree with what he said. And perhaps all the cities around the world are trying to take on new challenges. Out of hundreds and thousands of events and trials, you can attain innovation if you have a discerning eyes to see whether a new technology or something new is really something that works. And I think people in Kyoto are really excellent in discerning what is going to work and what will not. And this discerning capability is one great potential and strength of the people in Kyoto. Recently, I had a chance to meet with the president of Horiba Company Limited, and there was a person from Kyoto and Tokyo, and he said there are 3 people which we have to be aware of. And he mentioned the 3 kinds of people who are wearing white socks, split-toe socks. And he said there are 3 people like this: monks, priests, and the masters of tea ceremony, and the maiko-san. And no matter how important you might become in a company, if those 3 kinds of people look down on you, you can never be appreciated as something important in Kyoto. And the person from Tokyo asked him, why is that? And Mr. Horiba mentioned that those three groups of people have gone through a very severe periods of training. And out of the serious training, they have a kind of a yardstick for making judgment. So no matter what kind of field a person comes from, and no matter how important he or she might look, they have these discerning eyes, the ability to judge what kind of person he or she really is as a quality of a person. And as I mentioned, in Kyoto, there are many universities and colleges which invite so many different kinds of students to the city of Kyoto. And there are wonderful discoveries and innovations which have won Nobel Prizes in the past. And I think this really suggests that there are discerning capabilities among the people in Kyoto. And I think that is a very unique and important character of Kyoto. We have such centuries of history and tradition which we have kept and survived over the years. Yes, one of the crises Kyoto faced in history was the transfer of the capital of Japan from Kyoto to Tokyo. But from then, for instance, a unique dance was created newly in Kyoto, which is called the Miyako dance, and the cuisine, which is another innovation and the feature of Kyoto. In Edo feudal times, Osaka was regarded as the kitchen of the nation. But today, for Michelin guidebook, for instance, Kyoto is named top among the three cities, Kobe, Osaka, and Kyoto. I had a chance to talk with the presidents of the Restaurants Association in Kyoto. And he said when the capital was moved from Kyoto to Tokyo, restaurants in Kyoto felt a kind of crisis. And then they began to organize a competition among chefs. And one feature out of this competition is that all the chefs have to disclose the recipe. If you come across a wonderful recipe, perhaps a great chef will try to hide it. But all of those recipes have to be disclosed in this competition. Of course, even if you know a recipe, you cannot just copy. You have to win over the original. That is why the chefs in Kyoto have competed against each other to create something better and tastier. And that is the history and background to Kyoto. And that, I think, is the reason why culture and tradition have been nurtured to such an extent in Kyoto. Then how can we disseminate such a beauty of Kyoto to the rest of the world? I believe that Kyoto is facing another crisis today because Kyoto is becoming more and more Kyoto. I mean, there are many people who just think that Kyoto can be just as it is, like Kyoto. But there is a reason why Kyoto has survived this way. Because Kyoto is a city which invokes a kind of impression in the minds of people. Kyoto has survived over the years. I had a chance to guide a African leader who is a leader of a UN organization, and I took him to two temples, and he was impressed by the rock garden. A rock garden is beautiful, but at the same time, it is functional and it contains philosophical teachings. In the past, there were no illuminations outdoor, so having the white sand, little gravels in the rock garden illuminated the surrounding, and the autumnal colors of leaves. They are very pretty today, and there are so many momiji, Japanese maple trees around temple, because at summertime they would give you a nice cooly shade, and in winter time, the leaves fall, and this gives a nice sunlight and sunshine that would warm you up in winter time. And that's why those maple trees have been kept preserved in Kyoto. And there are so many people today who just like to see the pretty leaves, not knowing such a background. When I had a aesthetic training in Saitama, I walked back to Kyoto from this place, 7,600 kilometers, and I found one thing which was really different in Kyoto is that there was water sprinkled in front of a house. But when I was small, I was told that you have to sprinkle water spot to spot. You shouldn't just splash water all over the road. That will just make the air sticky. But if you sprinkle water spot by spot, that will be more inviting to people. And there are a lot of people who now operate restaurants in machiya, old houses. And in Kyoto, the incidence of fire is about half the national average because so many houses in Japan are of wood. So we have to be really careful about the fires taking place from the kitchen. But not knowing this importance, so many people now operate restaurants within those wooden houses. I think we really have to know why we have this and that way in Kyoto before we begin to disseminate the Kyoto culture to the rest of the world. Now about the tourism promotion strategies. In the past, it was more or less a sightseeing, visiting different temples. But seeing is not satisfactory for modern tourists. They begin to experience many things. But just experience for once may not long last. As a new movement in tourism, the important expression is being, who you are, why you are here. They try to look for something spiritual, learning in their tourist experience. Under such a trend, Kyoto is a city of religion, a city of culture, and philosophical thoughts. And I think this is where Kyoto can distinguish itself dramatically from other tourist destinations in the world. Last year, Costco, which is a big supermarket, the founder and president of Costco, the U.S. company, came to our temple for meditation. And when he left, he asked me, what is meant by Taizo, which is the name of our temple? Tai means as follows. If you go to a toilet, the slippers scattered around, but you tidy them up. And this is something which people may not know, but which is a good behavior you do. And the taito means to accumulate those merits, good behaviors, even if other peoples are not seeing it. And the president asked me, why do you have to accumulate those merits, good behaviors, while others do not know what you are doing? But I think that is very important. This kind of way of thinking may sound very different to visitors from abroad, and this will make him or her wonder, yeah, that is something I heard, but I have never thought of. That is something which the visitors will reflect upon their return from Kyoto. And such a spirituality is an area where Kyoto can be really good at and can do something with a great sense of confidence. Thank you.
So There are different Kyoto for each person, and I think such reasoning is very important for us researchers to try to elucidate. I was raised in Nishijin. I lived in a machiya, and I used to spray water every morning in front of the home, but at random, without having an idea as to what I was doing. So I think we should be more aware of why we do things in Kyoto. So now, let me call upon Mr. Hoso. Hoso is a company, traditional company of Nishijin weaving, but in terms of globalization, I think he is a leader for having provided their fabrics to Italian manufacturers, and so we would like to listen to Mr. Hoso. Thank you very much. I think we have already heard a lot, so there may be overlaps. But when we think about the Japanese tourism and Kyoto tourism, I would like to talk about 4 points. As President Murata talked about, one is global. When we think about tourism in Kyoto and Japan, we need the global viewpoint, as seen from outside. Especially in my job, we face a lot of intellectually and culturally savvy high net worth individuals, and the question is, what are they looking for when they come to Kyoto? We need to keep such a global viewpoint in mind when we try to develop the tourism resources. Second point, another point that was raised by President Murata. Second is creative and innovative. These are the key words. As we have already heard, I think new value creation, cities that create new values should be attractive to everyone, which may be cultural values, social values, values representing the era, or economic values. Anything, new values of lifestyle need to be created, and innovation need to be done in order to attract people. When I was talking with Reverend Matsuyama before, I was intrigued by the comment saying, when he said that Kyoto, of course, we are living on the culture that was created 300, 400, 500 years ago. Are we sure that we are creating a new culture so that our descendants 300 years, 400 years from now will be able to live on the culture that we generated today? We need that sort of perspective as well. We need to come up with a country or a city providing such values for future generations. A third point, which was mentioned by Professor Kondo, is the point of originality. As we have heard already, there are various local resources in Kyoto, tangible as well as intangible. So diving deeply into these local resources, we should try to bring out the unique characters and original tourism contents that these localities are able to provide. Especially in Kyoto, we can take various vantage points or perspectives so that we can accept people from the rest of the world who are looking for various aspects of cultural experience in Kyoto. I think we are a city that can co-create values with them. When we talk about tourism, people talk about they want to go to Italy or they want to go to the United States, but most people want to go to Venice, Milan, or New York, or Paris. I think we have heard about the city-states that President Murata talked about. People want to visit cities in particular. Therefore, I think we should also try to develop Kyoto with that understanding. My philosophy is that Kyoto should not connect with Tokyo. We should connect directly with different cities around the world. 2 months ago, I went to New York on business. We meet with the state-of-the-art designers and creators. And they said, I think from their business standpoint, they said they went to Tokyo and visited Kyoto, but now they say we wouldn't have to go to Tokyo. We would be able to fly into Kansai International Airport and go to Kyoto directly without passing through Tokyo. So I think that's what we are looking for. We need Kyoto to be directly connected with different cities around the world, and therefore, I think originality, taking advantage of the local resources, is important. And also, as Ms. Ikenobo as well as Reverend Matsuyama mentioned, the fourth point is excitement. We need exciting content to attract people, not just coming for seeing, but for experience, for various learning purposes. People come to the city of Kyoto. I think that is another aspect that we should give importance to. So global, creative and innovative, original and exciting. These are the characters that we look forward to developing here in Japan as well as in Kyoto. So I would like to give an actual example of what I'm trying to say. I believe you have in your handout, first of all, the magazine Forbes Japan, December edition, which introduces the traditional industries or the Zen meditation or other aspects of Kyoto, which the luxurious business people may want to experience in Kyoto when they come. They are very much interested in the traditional arts and crafts of Japan, and we are giving a recommendation or a proposal as to how best we are able to fulfill their stay in Kyoto. It was a 12-page special edition in Forbes Japan, and I think in the near future, the English version also will be carried in Forbes. Now, it says, discover your Japan. In the past, it used to be discover Japan, but now it's discover your Japan. Your values are important. So we want to have visitors come to Kyoto with different values, and also come to Japan with different values. And so we want to be a city full of content that cater to all these different values of different people coming to Japan and to Kyoto. Another example is I have brought these images. As a matter of fact, on the 22nd and 23rd of November, we had a trial to conduct this event. At the Toei Kyoto Studio Park, there was the event during the evening called Uzumasa Edo Sakaba. And the capacity was 600 people per night, so 1,200 people for 2 days, costing 6,500 yen per person to attend. And 1,200 tickets were immediately sold out. So this was a legendary 2-day event. The Toei Kyoto Studio Park, Dentsu, and the young CEOs of the traditional culture got together to introduce the Kyoto culture and the Edo culture together in this event. bringing together the arts and crafts, also inviting the 20 sake breweries in Kyoto, introducing people to the Kyoto cuisine. And by having the visitors experience various aspects, we wanted to communicate with them so that they can learn the spirituality of Kyoto through this event. And as a result, it was a great success. NHK and Asahi Broadcasting and other media reported on this, as well as foreign media. I would just like to show you some photographs of what this event was all about. The hosts and hostesses were actually people who represent the Kyoto culture, and the artists and the designers and creators representing Kyoto, and also the actors who work at Toei Kyoto Studio Park, welcoming 1,200 visitors during the night of the 22nd and 23rd of November. So I will show you some images. So we used the Toei Kyoto Studio Park after it was closed. So it was transformed into a cultural entertainment facility for adults, transported through time to the Edo period. People enjoyed wearing kimono. So of the 1,200 people, 70% or so were in their 30s or 40s. And of the people who came, we didn't say that the dress code was kimono, but 70% of them really came voluntarily wearing a kimono. So, like this. And so the people representing Kyoto culture, artists, craftsmen, who are all professionals, welcomed the visitors. So traditional craft like ornamental hairpin. This is the actual craftsman who actually makes the ornamental hairpin, dressed as a merchant, and also mounting of pictures or scrolls. Lanterns were also made. They are all professional people, and the workshops allow the people to participate and experience. My oldest son also participated in the discussion among the young masters. We also had the guests from overseas, and also 20 sake breweries also presented their top-class sake, and people could taste them and compare them. In the theater stage, no performance was given, and also in the workshop, there was also the workshop conducted by a painter. From the Congo company, Utai, reciting of no text, and Tsuzumi hand drum was also performed. Nodate tea ceremony in open air, Japanese cuisine. So sake and food were included in the 6,500 yen charge. So it was a tasting opportunity comparing the 20 sake breweries of Kyoto. And there was a live show of period dramas, samurai drama. The actors of Toei Kyoto Studios Park started to fight with swords. So it was a live show, very entertaining. And Rimpa, Japanese School of Art, was also presented. And the shoes of Mr. Kushino was also displayed, who makes Lady Gaga's shoes. Also, the licensed quarters. She is a professional dancer. This is also a glimpse of the licensed quarters and what sort of things take place. So we try to create Kyoto as a cultural entertainment park. which we can present to the world. There's Tokyo Disneyland in Tokyo. We have the University of Japan in Osaka. I hope we can develop this in Kyoto so that we can have such an entertainment twice a year in Kyoto during the summer and the winter, hoping that the Japanese tourists as well as foreign visitors having a greater interest in Kyoto through these activities. Although I did not bring the material for this, but in terms of creation, Kyoto City, Kyoto Prefecture, and the Kyoto Association of Corporate Executives are going to engage in something called the Parasofia, which is going to be an international art exhibition taking place from March to May of next year of contemporary art. And this Parasofia is not an opportunity just to have displays of contemporary art of artists from around the world, but we are trying to provide a place for these artists so that they are able to create artwork in Kyoto directly and to show their artwork starting from Kyoto. So this starts from March of next year. I hope you will have an opportunity to visit and experience Parasofia. We hope that Japan and Kyoto will become even more innovative and creative in the future. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Hoso. So that was 6,500 yen. I wish I could go, so please invite me on next occasion. We have been working together. I myself from the academic perspective and he from the business perspective in order to develop the traditional craft and businesses here in Kyoto. So I was very struck by the new content introduced to us. Thank you.
Now, next is Professor Maekawa. On a slightly different angle, he is from a business school. He obtained MBA in a Boston School, and from the service industry point of view, he does some studies in Kyoto and what Kyoto can do originally. Thank you very much. I am Maekawa. I have 10 minutes, and for about 1 minute, I'd like to use it for making an excuse. We started from the keynote speech by Professor Kondo, very impressive and of high value. For instance, a mother in Tohoku area, that almost brought tears to my eyes. And President Murata also talked of a very laudable and a noble speech. And my talk today is very much of low quality, or more or less down to the earth kind of talk. And perhaps you will remember that. And Mayor of Kyoto discussed a wonderful highbrow speech, and Madam Ikenobu and Reverend Matsuyama also discussed a highbrow speeches. And now I'm going to discuss something really different from the topics given to us. But the title says what we can do in Kyoto for tourist nation Japan. But my talk is not spiritual at all, more down to the earth, realistic kind of presentation. Two kinds of omotenashi hospital and two-factor theory, motivators and hygiene factors, and the role sharing between the public and private. Those are the main topics of my intervention. First, the two kinds of omotenashi hospitality. Well-known Ms. Crystal Takigawa making speech to invite Tokyo Olympic Games to Tokyo. I am not her fan, but when she made this gesture, omotenashi really took me by surprise, and I was really attracted by her. But for about 1 year, I was something uncomfortable about hospitality she talked about, and I transcribed what she discussed as omotenashi, downloading from YouTube. She talked of omotenashi, hospitality, as shown in the slide. First, tangible and intangible hospitality. And she discussed all of them, mixing them together. For tangible hospitality, public transportation, traditional culture, highly sophisticated boutiques, and world-class restaurants, and live and concert events. All of those are tangible things. As Tokyo Prefecture government, what they can promise to deliver is perhaps only public transportation, but traditional culture or highly sophisticated boutiques and so forth are to be delivered not by the government but by the people and the private. So what the Tokyo Prefecture as the government can really deliver as a promise is a public transportation system. All the rest is left to the private sector. Another part of the hospitality is intangible spirituality, consideration to others, kindness and friendliness to guests. And it's okay that she talks of those intangible spirituality as hospitality, but is that something that Tokyo government can really promise as commitments? Those intangible spirituality must come from the citizens. So I felt uncomfortable when she discussed omotenashi, when she put all of those different things together in a simple word of hospitality. But from a Tokyo government stance, how many of those can be really promised to deliver? And I think that is the reason why I had some uncomfortable feeling when I heard her speech of hospitality. Now, two-factor theory. This is a theory for labor management, but please allow me to go through this. When employees are interviewed, there are two different kinds of experiences. The periods which the employees felt exceedingly happy and exceedingly unhappy. When they felt exceedingly happy were achievement or recognition or responsibility or the work itself. On the other hand, they felt exceedingly unhappy about the company policy, management, supervision, relationship with superiors or co-workers. So those two sets of factors are truly different. Even if you eliminate the causes of unhappy experiences, would not necessarily motivate employees. So the employees felt happy when they were able to achieve something. And of course, achievement, recognition, and work itself and responsibilities motivate the employees. On the other hand, the company policy, supervision, and the relationship with the supervisor, those are the reasons of unsatisfaction. But even if they are eliminated, it doesn't necessarily motivate the employees. Interesting is pay and benefits. Even if pay and benefits are raised, that may make the employees happy temporarily, but that will not necessarily motivate them for further work. So these two sets of factors are really different from each other and separate. Of course, there could be many more debate concerning this two-factor theory, but the thing as follows can be said. That is, factors causing satisfaction with work are different from the factors that are causing unhappiness. So if you eliminate the factors of unhappiness or dissatisfaction, the employees may stay in the company, but that will not necessarily raise the sense of motivation or satisfaction at the workplace. In services industry, there are factors that will raise the level of satisfaction on customers and guests, and also the factors which mitigate their dissatisfaction. And these are two separate sets of factors. One thing which is not truly a laughing stock this is a combination between two foreign visitors. Well, Wi-Fi is not accessible in Kyoto. Why don't we go to Kyoto then? And they have now visitor-friendly direction boards and guideposts. Why don't we go to Kyoto then? A train ride from Kansai International Airport to Kyoto is shorter by 10 minutes. Why don't we go to Kyoto? This all means that some factors of dissatisfaction were eliminated, but does it really make people go to Kyoto? That's a different thing. This is another piece of joke. One consultant said, you are now perfect for halal meat food. And then the hotel manager said, thank you very much. And the consultant mentioned that you will have more guests. And the hotel manager asked the consultant, which countries' guests are you going to bring to our hotel? And the consultant said, well, that's not my job, that's your job. So these are jokes, and what I want to stress to you is that a set of dissatisfaction factors are different from a set of motivation. And for motivators, for motivating factors, illumination in the evening of temples and landscape and cuisine, using local vegetables, friendly citizens, and clean streets. Those are motivating factors for people to come to Kyoto. On the other hand, there are a list of dissatisfaction, complicated buses and the subway network, illegal parking on the streets, traffic jam, and no signage in English, high transportation fares and admission fees. Wi-Fi is not readily usable in Kyoto. But I think that the Kyoto needs to differentiate the two sets of factors, minding that eliminating dissatisfaction factors do not necessarily raise the motivation of people to come to Kyoto. This is the level of satisfaction with Kyoto among foreign tourists. And the difficulty of using Wi-Fi, perhaps eliminating this dissatisfaction may help more people to come back to Kyoto second time or third time. But for the foreign people who have never come to Kyoto to finally come to Kyoto, I think you need to raise the level of motivation factors. Of course, you need to try to eliminate the factors of elimination, but these two separate factors need to be differentiated from each other. There are some local authorities who are satisfied just by eliminating the factors of dissatisfaction, but that is not enough. While you do so, you need to also raise the level of motivation factors. And I believe that the role of government is to eliminate factors of unhappiness, but I believe that the private sectors need to do more to provide intangible hospitalities and try to create more motivation factors. And this is the essence of my talk today. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor Maegawa. The public and private, what is the roles to be played by the two different sectors? This is a very important area. How can they work together is an important subject of discussion. Now I'd like to turn to Mr. Iwai.
As I have already introduced him, Mr. Iwai is president of Hatoya Kanko Company Limited. On the other hand, he is chairman of the Divisional Group of Tourism and Transportation of KCCI. In that sense, so I think he can talk both about the public and the private sector. So now I'd like to invite Mr. Iwai. Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for the introduction. I am chairman of the Divisional Group of Tourism and Transportation of KCCI. My name is Iwai. Very good to see you. USJI, as it holds its international symposium today, I would like to express my congratulations, as well as to give my appreciation for being invited as a speaker or panelist. I would like to talk about Kyoto, and of course, the mayor and the prefecture of the business community, including KCCI. We are taking all Kyoto approach to develop various resources. We may also ask for collaboration with the academia and the religious community, and together we are trying to develop our tourism resources, inviting all the stakeholders to give their input. And we are trying to become a lubricant, so to speak, as a chamber to bring all of these stakeholders together. We have already heard the current state of the situation of Kyoto by Mayor Kadokawa, but let me go over the basics once again. Should I operate the PC myself? I'd like to discuss the current state of tourism in Kyoto. So this is the article carried in a local Kyoto Shimbun newspaper, pointing to the fact that last year the visitors of Kyoto was 51.62 million people, hitting a record high. Yes, this is the newspaper article. This shows the number of tourists. So Kyoto City has come up with its 50 million visitors plan, and this was achieved in 2008, in 8 years' time. But with the Lehman crisis and the global financial crisis and the March 11 Great East Japan earthquake, there was a drop in the number of visitors. But once again, we have hit the record high of 51 million and above. In Arashiyama, next week, there is going to be an event called the Hanatoro, which marks its 10th anniversary. And in March, in Higashiyama, there's a Hanatoro event. In August, there is going to be the Kyoto Tanabata event. 1 million or more visitors are expected on such occasions for each event. So the Kyoto, we have been working together with the Kyoto residents to support such events. Next, as for the foreign visitors who stayed in Kyoto, last year, we hit the record high once again at 1.13 million. And LCC Airlines also brought many visitors. Also, the relaxation of the visa issuance also had a role to play in bringing more foreign visitors. And we are experiencing a more than 30% growth year on year. Probably we may hit 1.4, 1.5 million by the end of the year even. Next. This is the room occupancy ratio of the hotels in Kyoto. It is above 90% level, out of which the foreign visitors take up about 30-some percent. Especially one characteristic of that of Kyoto is that we have many visitors coming from North America. Taiwan, Korea, Chinese visitors may be more prevalent in other cities, but in case of Kyoto, we have a great number of visitors coming from North Americas. But perhaps we have seen some decline this year with that group, with the increase of Thailand and China growing more. Next is the amount consumed in relation to tourism. Last year, we have surpassed 700 billion yen. However, the unit price for the hotel stay is about 32,000 yen. There is still more to do in terms of amount spent, in terms of consuming, in terms of shopping and hotel stays. The foreign visitors do a lot of shopping, and on a per capita basis, they spend about 150,000 yen. In case of Japanese tourists, they only spend about 30,000 yen on average. So we see greater spending by the foreign visitors. So the idea is to increase duty-free shops. This October, the system has been revised so that the duty-free shops have increased in number, and there are a total of 9,361 duty-free shops for Japan as a whole. Kyoto Chamber of Commerce and Industry. The chairman is Mr. Tateishi, the honorary chairman of Omron, and he's in his third term. So there is we are in the third stage of a new vision of KCCI. This is the third stage. Here, we are trying to utilize the local resources and are trying to say that Kyoto is the city of industries of wisdom. Four years ago, we gave the policy recommendation on tourism in Kyoto to the governor and the mayor of Kyoto to take measures to increase the number of guests who stay in Kyoto to 20 million, and also to enhance exchange with the East Asian countries and to promote the MICE. We need to be responsive to the changes of the environment involving tourism. So we are undertaking projects to enhance such responsiveness. The proportion of foreign visitors are increasing. And as we have already heard, experience type of stays are also being promoted. Based on various key case studies, we have been holding seminars to study the opportunities. We also are engaging in projects to deepen the inbounds. Now, this is a newly coined term in terms of the Chinese characters that are used for the deepening. We want to dig deeply into the creation of gaiety and more engagement with the inbound visitors. MICE, of course, is a key word nowadays. standing for meeting, incentive travel, and convention and exhibition. Now, we are a membership organization at the Kyoto Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Therefore, we are now undertaking a questionnaire with our members, and based on the responses, we would like to continue with the activities to attract these events or activities to Kyoto. Another aspect is the engagement with wide area tourism. One of the there are strengths as well as weaknesses for Kyoto. So, in order to make up for the weaknesses, we need to work on a wide area basis with the other cities and prefectures in Kansai. So the 6 chambers in Kansai have worked together to go on a top promotion tour, also inviting travel agents from China together. We have tried to reach out to other prefectures in the region to work together to invite visitors together for mutual benefit. The city of Kyoto made an analysis of the strengths and weaknesses of Kyoto tourism. SWOT analysis. The strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. As you can see in the bullets, there are different challenges. There are many strengths. And next year, or shall I start from the threats, the bottom right? Hokuriku Shinkansen is going to become operational. I think from the transportation standpoint, we took for granted that people will naturally come to Kyoto. But with the extension of the Shinkansen to other regional cities, people may flow to other cities like Kanazawa and other cities connected by Shinkansen from Tokyo. So the Rugby World Cup, World Masters Games, such events will take place. So we would like to try to see how we are able to build on our strengths to invite people attending such events to the city of Kyoto. And at the end, let me show you this. The Japanese government is working on the action program 2014 for Japan to become a tourism-oriented nation. So what we can do from Kyoto is to hold the Kyoto Culture Fair. We are looking into the holding of this. The Olympic Games will be hosted in 2020, the Summer Olympic Games. So culture program is required under the Olympic Charter to be held in conjunction with the Games, and therefore we hope that we can do our part to contribute in that sense. Finally, tourism of today, I think, is quite beneficial economically speaking as well, starting from based on how much they spend when they come to Japan. So if we have a greater number of people come to Japan with a declining population in Japan, we will be able to offset the loss of a population by having an increased number of visitors who spend money in Japan. So we want to build Kyoto City as a universal design city and work together with other cities of Kansai. Sorry for sounding a bit disorganized, but I thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much, Mr. Iwai. Under Chairman Tateishi, you are promoting Kyoto as a city of wisdom. And I think that is a very interesting initiative. I was talking with the people of Hawaii, and they were impressed that we were doing this, and because they were not able to do that much. So, leaving the details aside, I think the audience might have felt what sort of things are being promoted in Kyoto. So we would like to deepen those aspects under discussion. Now, moving on to the last speaker.
Mr. Wexler Jeffrey, Professor Kondo, in his keynote speech, mentioned that we would like to have foreigners, non-Japanese, who can act as the ambassadors of Kyoto. And Mr. Wexler Jeffrey is indeed such a person who is a very important person, a contributor to Japanese tourism promotion. Now, I would like to turn to Mr. Jeffrey Wexler, please. You are going to speak in English. He is extremely good at Japanese, but he wants to speak in English. So I would like to ask the Japanese audience to put on an earpiece. And I will begin with Japanese. Thank you very much for the kind introduction. My name is Jeffrey Wexler with Studio Ghibli. I am here in Kyoto, the city I love so deeply. And I'm very happy to take part as a panelist to discuss Kyoto here in Kyoto. And so I would like to use the services of simultaneous interpreters. And also, the symposium we have today is going to be a later webcast. So for the American audience, please allow me to speak in English now.
Before I begin my prepared remarks, I want to talk for a moment about expectations. So I'm always wondering when I give a speech, what are the organizers' expectations in inviting me? And what are your expectations in sitting there and listening to me? And I think, should I speak at the level of high-level ideas? We heard many high-level ideas from my colleagues here. Not really my colleagues, are much more sophisticated people than I am. That's a very rude thing to say, wasn't it? I'm sorry. Should I bring you practical ideas? What should I bring you? And I want to talk a little bit later about expectations as well. So as a speaker, I think, why did you select me? Why did you invite me? Why did you invite a foreigner? Why did you invite someone from Ghibli? Foreigners break the rules. I'm standing up now. Foreigners bring a different view. Why did you invite this foreigner? I lived in Kyoto for 3 years, starting 27 years ago. So why have me now? And also, why have someone from Ghibli? And why have me go last? What could possibly be left to say? I've been sitting here for an hour wondering, will there be anything left to say? Thankfully, I think there might be a couple things left to say, so I'll see how I do. And I feel, forgive me if I repeat some of the very good ideas that my esteemed colleagues have. How about if we go with that? And I'm going to focus on tourism. I'm not going to focus on particular business. I won't focus on innovation. I won't focus on fostering creativity or cross-border relationships. I'm going to talk about tourism. Those are all topics that could have their own full-day seminars, but I'm really, really going to focus on tourism. And I'm going to get, what we say, down into the weeds, really into the basics for a few minutes. I'm going to challenge all of us with some questions. And I'm assuming I go last because I'm a segue to the discussion. I'm going to assume that. So I'm going to leave some things open for us to discuss. So you've got a foreigner here. Foreigners always break the rules. You've got someone from Ghibli. And I had made this wonderful outline I'm very proud of. I'm excited to speak to you. And my wife, as husbands and wives do, last night challenged me. Your friends say, you'll do great. Your wives and husbands say, how can you be better? Why you? She said, aren't you going to show some Ghibli stuff up on the screen? I said, no, people didn't come here to watch some Ghibli stuff. They can watch Ghibli stuff. And then I realized, looking over my outline, that I prepared this talk the same way I prepare in my job. A big part of my job is to get Ghibli films from the studio in Tokyo overseas. And I also produce the English versions, so the subtitle versions and the dubbed versions. And we have a lot of questions and a lot of philosophical challenges that we face when figuring out how to get our films overseas, and then, even harder, getting people to watch these Japanese films. And I realized my entire outline that I prepared is getting people to come to Kyoto. And then the next part of our job, or my job, is to get those people who saw the films to tell their friends to go see the films. I thought, my outline is about getting people to tell their friends to come to Kyoto. And I realized I was applying my Ghibli experience to this experience, or to this challenge. And I also thought, I've traveled a bit. I've traveled and gone shopping for souvenirs, and I've traveled to go shopping for stuff. Like I went to Hong Kong to buy a bunch of stuff many years ago. I've traveled as a student when I had no money. I've traveled as a father with a family. I've traveled at a time when I had a little bit of extra cash to spend. So I've traveled different times in different ways. And today when I arrived in Kyoto, I got to Kyoto Station at 11:11, and I just seen sunshine in Tokyo, 1.5 feet of snow in Nagoya, and beautiful day in Kyoto. I don't know how it is now. And I decided to play tourist. So I turned off the data on my phone, and I pretended I didn't speak any Japanese, just like it was 27 years ago, except the station's a lot bigger now, and there's a lot more English on all the signs. And I went to the tourist bureau, and I picked up everything they have in English. Everything. Matter of fact, everything in a foreign language. You may think that's a little. I think that's a lot these days when people don't have much printed. And I was delighted to find the same brochure I found 27 years ago. And this is a good thing. I have photocopied and given friends this brochure over and over for 27 years. This is Kyoto Walks, and there are a couple different versions of this. And I also picked up a map. But I had to go to the counter to get these. These weren't put out front. I still think this is the best thing that office puts out. This is the tourist office at Kyoto Station. I always go there. And this was there. And I have some other things I'll talk about in a few minutes. So that was a little bit about what happened when I arrived at the station. And I had my data plan off, so I looked for Wi-Fi. I saw a sign that said Kyoto Wi-Fi. I'm sorry, Mayor, it didn't work as well as I would have liked, but it was nice to see, and it will get better. And I found in my notes I had written 3 times, Wi-Fi, Wi-Fi, Wi-Fi. I'm not even a teenager who loves Wi-Fi, but it came up a lot. And I won't bring it up again, because everyone's talked about Wi-Fi. We can talk about other things today. So, why me? You've got someone who breaks the rules. You've got someone who'll bring a different view, someone from Ghibli who thinks about promoting Japanese things to foreigners, and you have someone who lived in Kyoto. So, maybe I'm a good person to talk for you for at least a few minutes. And now I'll sit down. You're all still here, so that's good. So before we talk about what Kyoto can communicate to the world, excuse me, and the essence of Kyoto and conveying its appeal to the world, this was our homework. Before we do that, I want to ask a few questions. What are the objectives of attracting tourists? In other words, why do we want to attract tourists to Kyoto? I lived here for 3 years. I had a great time. I saw amazing things. It changed my life. I live in Japan now because I lived in Kyoto in the beginning. I'm absolutely sure of that. But why are we here talking about bringing tourists to Japan? Do we want to share the wonders and the jewels of Kyoto? Because there are plenty. Do we want people from different cultures to interact? That's a great thing. We love that. We like when that happens. That's world peace right there in the making. Do we want to make some money for Kyoto? Sure. Which of these is our objectives? You can say they're all our objectives, but when you decide your strategy, you may want to think about one at a time. Or maybe an objective I haven't thought about, and we'd definitely like to hear from you on other objectives. We've already heard from some folks on other objectives. Let's talk about who. Who's coming Who do we want to come? There are types of tourists. And most people fall into several categories, and there are many kinds, but I'm going to talk about 5 types of tourists. And I already hinted at them a few minutes ago. There are souvenir tourists. They come here to take pictures. Those pictures are their souvenirs. They come to buy gifts, and they complete their travel checklist. Went to Rome, went to Kyoto. That's great. There's nothing wrong with those tourists. We love those tourists. Those are good tourists. There are shoppers. They come here to buy. Stuff may be cheaper, it might be unique, it might be both. But there are definitely shopper tourists. We like them too. There are students and backpackers. They come on the cheap, but they will, in the future, be the other types of tourists. And they also communicate more than anybody else to the world what they experience. I mean, you've seen them. I think they should just tie their phone to their hand because it's always in their hand. And they're constantly saying, I'm now walking up Shijodori. I just saw a Kyoto wagashi. They do this constantly. I say they because I have a 14-year-old daughter and she does it all the time. So we have students and backpackers. Then we have families and couples. They're here to spend some time together. They don't get time together back home. Everybody's going different directions. I know about my house, it's like that. My biggest objective in going on a holiday now is to spend time with my kids and my wife. That's why I'm going now. And then you have the deep pockets, the big spenders, the ones with lots of money. What do they want? What are they seeking exactly? Now, for reference, let's talk about Japanese tourists. Many Japanese tourists fall into one of these categories. Stereotypes say that Japanese are souvenir tourists or shopper tourists. Okay, that's cool. A lot of other countries have souvenir tourists. And the impression that the world has of Japanese tourists is they run from place to place, take a quick picture of a place, and go to the next one. I think it's great. They have a ball. It's easy to say, you should stay here and spend more time here, but they really look happy. They really are happy tourists, and I don't think that's a bad thing, but that's one kind of tourist. And that's how many, I think, Japanese tourists think about tourism coming to Japan. A tourist coming to Japan. They'll go to Yasaka Jinja, they'll take a picture in front of it, they'll read the sign, might understand the sign, won't think about why the momiji is there, and then they'll go on to the next one. So Kyoto has great appeal. Now some things are unique to Kyoto, and it's very nice to say something is unique, but not everything in Kyoto is unique to Kyoto. You can find some things here in other places. I went to Takayama last year for the first time, and it blew my mind. I felt like some of those streets were like being in Kyoto. I loved it. And there were things there also I'd never seen anywhere else. But nowhere but Kyoto do you have so many appealing things in one place. That's what's amazing here. I got up every weekend morning for 3 years, and I had my map from the bank that was on the wall with a calendar on the bottom, you know it. And I would say, okay, I'm gonna go here, and I'd ride my little motor scooter up there, and I'd park my motor scooter, and I would walk in a spiral. Someone taught me this. And I would just walk in a spiral at a certain point in Kyoto, and boy, did I discover things. I discovered so much. So you have so much here that you can't find in other places, and you have so much here, completely. And it meets everyone's expectations of what Japan looks like. It feels like Japan. The only place in Tokyo that feels like Japan is Asakusa. It's Asakusa. So when people come to Tokyo, I say, go to Asakusa on your first day, go somewhere else, come back to Asakusa, buy your souvenirs, and go home. The rest of Tokyo feels like Tokyo, but maybe modern Japan, but it doesn't feel like Japan. You can't bump into this guy in Tokyo. You just can't. And you can't suddenly stroll into a temple or a garden or a little shop making things that absolutely amaze you. So in Kyoto, it's easy to find examples of wonderful things. There are traditional arts. You can observe a tea ceremony. You can go to Kyoto Odori. There are festivals to watch. By the way, these are all terrific things, but they're the easy ones to talk about. There are sites of interest, temples, shrines, gardens, machiya we've talked about. And there are places of beauty. Every year I went up to the mountains north of Kyoto and took rolls and rolls of film. For those in the audience who are very young, we used to use film. And I used to go use film and take the same pictures every year up in the mountains at Kuramadera, Kibune Jinja. Every year, same pictures, because they were so breathtaking beautiful. And walking down in Kyoto, in the heart of the city, and seeing the sakura every year, I was blown away by what I saw. And of course, there are unique products here. We have washi, there's nowhere else. There are wagashi sweets, there are fabrics or paper, it's all here. But I'm going to suggest to you that observing these things and taking a picture of them, and often only seeing them through your camera, it's fun, but a lot of tourists are finding it to be shallow. It's just a shallow experience. There's so much to see, and there's so much to do, but you have that experience, and tomorrow you go to Osaka-jo and you forget about Kyoto. Then you go to Nara, and you see the deer, and you think, deer are cool, and forget what happened 2 days ago. You don't remember. What happens tomorrow erases what happens yesterday. Your memory, your memory is gone. So these are not personal memories, and they are not durable memories. They are not durable memories. I'm going to talk a little bit about durability. Today, a lot competes for people's attention. So how do we stay in a visitor's mind? So they spread the word of why to go to Kyoto. Because you can spend all the money in the world, but the best advertising is me telling someone else, go to Kyoto. It's much better. The advertising helps. Maybe someone will ask me, but word of mouth is the best way to go. Just like for our films. No amount of money that my partners spend on our films is going to be better than someone saying, go see Kaz Touching You, it's amazing. Which is amazing, by the way. So language is less of an issue now. When I came to Kyoto in 1987, there was very little English. The subway had it, thank goodness, but that was about it. That issue is pretty much gone. There's wonderful language. It's not just English now. I see Korean, I see Chinese, I see many other languages here now. But there are many challenges. Restaurants can be tough. Transport can be tricky. It's getting much better. Getting around town can be tricky. There are cultural faux pas everywhere, what to do when. I mean, people still don't know, when do I take off my shoes? It's still a question. So what do we do? How do we both appeal to people to bring them here, and then when they get here and are here and then go home, they talk about their experience in Kyoto? And by the way, going last, I'm not going to look at the clock as much. I hope you don't mind. I'm just going to keep going for a bit. So let's revisit our tourists. Souvenir tourists. They're here to take pictures, buy gifts. Kyoto is a clear leader for those tourists. There's lots to see. There's lots of gifts to buy. Shopper tourists. Great city for that. Kyoto's a clear winner. Although the information might be a little bit hard on how to find the current cool thing. You know, I'm lucky because I can read a little bit of Japanese, speak Japanese. My colleagues at the studio love Kyoto products. They're always telling me what the coolest thing is in Kyoto, so I can always buy gifts when I'm here. But most foreigners don't have that experience. So shopping, Kyoto has it all. How people find it might be tricky. Students and backpackers, well, it is an expensive country, although right now the currency is in student and backpackers' favor. But because of the internet, these folks can find things that we can never find. My first 3 nights in Kyoto was in a little house around the corner, just off of Madagawa Dori. We called it a gaijin house at the time, when I was looking for an apartment. So I found a way, even when I first arrived here, and I had about $300 or $400 in my pocket, about sanmai in my pocket. Families and couples. Now it's getting a little bit harder. Families and couples, they have a lot of specific needs, families in particular. And the families, depending on the age of their children, it's going to be pretty tough. And then you have the deep pockets, the big spenders. They're the biggest mystery. What do they want? What will satisfy them? If your goal is to have the highest number of tourists, don't go after the big spenders. If your goal is to get people to spend money and then talk about why they came, they're a good category to go after. So I'm going to talk today about families and couples, and I'm really going to talk about deep pockets and big spenders. So both types, families and couples and deep pockets and big spenders, seek quality of experience over quantity of experience. They didn't come to take 100 pictures. They came to have something more. I talked about families and couples want to spend time together. They will do less, but they want bigger memories that satisfy them. It's time together more than quantity. And I'll give you a few examples, what I've done with my family, and we can see if we can repeat them in Kyoto. So recreation, they come for recreation, they come for a break. For example, when I traveled with my kids when they were younger, before we went, we found out where every swimming pool was in every city we went to. Those kids got in that pool almost every day. If they knew where they were getting in the pool in the afternoon, they had a great time in the morning. We'd find parks so they could play. And I could sit with my wife and our traveling companions, enjoy a cup of coffee while the kids were happy. We found supplies, water, diapers, basic medicines. You have to have hotel rooms that accommodate parents and kids. It's too easy to say, just get 2 rooms. It doesn't work. It just doesn't work, and it's too expensive. So if you want to go after families, think about families. And food. Kids are tough. If you don't offer food that kids will eat, they'll end up at McDonald's eating chicken nuggets. They will. And that's what happens. So family restaurants and family-friendly restaurants. Happy kids, happy parents. Very simple. Family needs are easy. They may cost money, but they're easy to understand. But what about the deep pockets and the big spenders? What do they want? What will satisfy people for whom cost is no issue? Cost is not a key issue. What will satisfy them? What are you thinking right now? What would someone who has money and a little bit of time, what would they want out of their trip to Kyoto? So I have a proposal to you. My proposal to you is that plans for the future should seek to create durability of memory. Durability of memory, and I've mentioned this earlier. This is what you want, the creation of personal memory, to create and offer not just beautiful places, you got plenty of beautiful places, but distinctly Kyoto-only memorable experiences. And Hosoe-san earlier talked about some of those experiences as well. As did Ikenombu-san, we've heard a little bit about experiences, but I'm going to take it to another level. So the setting must be in Kyoto. Not every experience will be only in Kyoto. You can do some of these things other places, but the setting must be Kyoto. So what constitutes an experience? What am I talking about? What is an experience? An experience is something that takes some time. It may take some preparation by the people organizing the experience, and it may take some time by the people attending the experience. It requires attention. You can't be doing this during the experience. It requires focus. And I know you have people who come for experiences quite often. That's a very traditional Kyoto experience. An experience sparks interest. It sparks wonder. It may appeal to an existing personal interest. I love flowers. At home, I want to learn more about flowers in Japan. It may appeal to something that I've always wanted to learn about, but never had a chance. Or it may be something I've never thought about before. But it sparks something here and here. It's doing something, not just watching something. It could be creating something, not just buying something. It could be learning something, not just reading about it or hearing about it. It's learning. It's thinking. It's wondering. It could be being puzzled. It could be challenged. You could be quite confused. I love the discussion of why the momiji. That's a great question. Why momiji here? And I used to walk around Kyoto, and every morning I saw the water being sprinkled, and I always thought, why just a little bit of water? I finally asked somebody, and I learned. So I was puzzled, I was challenged, I was intrigued, I was fascinated, and I was often confused, and then I was educated. And I remember these things. Do I remember what I read on the little sign in front of the museum in Florence? No. Do I remember my experiences? Yes. So families are here to share time together, give them experiences that have them interact with each other, not just looking forward. Give them experiences they will never have at home, and they'll talk about them forever. Deep pockets and big spenders, they can buy things they want at home. And these days, you can buy almost anything, anywhere. It's pretty easy to order almost anything everywhere if you hear about it. So give them something they can only do here by actually coming here that makes them feel, that's important, makes them feel very unique, very special. Basically, they feel cool. They feel kakui. I went to Kyoto, and I did this, and you didn't, is how a lot of these people like to feel. Make them feel special for knowing and then actually doing something. Give them rare, exclusive, and infrequently available opportunities. I'll repeat that. Rare, exclusive, and infrequently available. Work with what we call concierge services. For example, if you have a high-level American Express card, then you get to call up concierge. You can say, I got something special for you that no one else can do. Really special. Work with those high-end travel agents. There are travel organizations you may not have heard of. My mother's a travel agent. Her agency is one of 50 agencies, and there are a lot more than 50 agencies. Her agency is one of 50 agencies as a member of a very high-end travel agency organization, and they get approached all the time with these experience opportunities. So let's talk about Kyoto experience. Can I keep going for a few minutes? Is it okay? You want me to wrap it up? I know, but I gotta go. So think about personal interests, and I'll give you an experience. So I went to Marrakesh with my wife, and we went to a cooking class. We still talk about that half day all the time. We started in a kitchen looking at a recipe. Then we were taken out to a market, and we shopped in the market for spices and ingredients. Then we were taken to a local oven where everybody in the community brought their dough to rise and bake at the local oven. That was amazing. I've never seen a local oven that the whole community uses. Then we went back to the kitchen to prep, cook. We had some wine while we were cooking, so that was fun. Got to know our fellow classmates, eat and laugh. We shared recipes, we got a group photo, we have memories, and we still have friends from that experience. And you can bet I have told many people, I just told 200 people about that experience. So I put together a list, and I won't do the whole list because Murayama-san will be very unhappy if I do the whole list. But I put together a list the other night just off the top of my head based on living in Kyoto for 3 years. That means this is a bad list because since 24 years ago, there are some new things here as well. So I'm going to mention a few. How about an architectural walking tour by local architects? Start at their offices. Look what they do. How do they do architecture here? Different than there. Then go out and walk the city. Meet a temple builder. How temple building is a unique kind of building. I've always heard it's a certain way you use the wood the way the tree grew in the forest. You don't use nails. All these things, and I don't know if they're true. I've heard these amazing things about temple building. Meet a temple builder and then build something. Go check out online London walks and look at all the different walks around London and repeat those in Kyoto. There are so many interesting history tours you could do here. Fabrics, a good friend of mine here in Kyoto worked in a Yuzen dyeing, I guess you'd say a factory. He took me a whole day. We started at a designer's, then we went to a thread making factory, then he took me to a dyeing factory, then he took me to a loom. I watched the entire process of an obi being made. That was a long time ago and I remember it very clearly. Maybe have someone weave their own bit of fabric. Cooking classes I've mentioned, instead of just buying tofu and sagano, make tofu and sagano. Music lessons, obviously very easy. Fashion, what is Kyoto fashion? Don't just go to a store, go to a fashion school. Meet young designers, design with them. Go, shogi, mahjong, games, learn from a master, play with your friends or your travel companions, meet other people. I got more, I'll just go real fast. Painting, calligraphy, pottery, festivals, philosophy, botany, kyogen, tea ceremony, flowers, bicycle tours. I mean, it just keeps going. I couldn't stop. There's so many things to do here. Because how could I spend 3 years here if it was just stuff to see? It was obviously there was great stuff to do. Then there are the modern versions of things. What about Nintendo? You've got Nintendo. That's Nintendo. Do something with Nintendo. Create an experience where people visit the campus, meet a game designer, observe a game lab, and maybe even program their own game. See a hardware design lab and maybe design your own controller. Yes, these are complicated experiences. People will pay good money for them, and people will have great experiences and talk about them. You have Kyocera, meet a researcher, learn about materials research. Not for everybody, but for someone interested in science or materials. And materials, to me, are the most amazing innovations of all right now. Materials blow my mind. And there are other Kyoto-based technologies and innovation where you could create these experiences. So, a good experience does not have a stop at an omiyage store for 45 minutes. A good experience is focused. And I want to go through a few concrete actions. I love seeing the bikes around town, fantastic. I mentioned Wi-Fi earlier, we know that. Look at the UK's National Trust. 3 years I lived in London with my family, and almost every weekend was a National Trust weekend. It's an organization that protects properties, but the way they invite people in with their catalog, that is an amazing way to bring people in. Make sure you have kids' trails everywhere you go where kids can learn things and kids have experiences seeking things out. Teach people cultural tips. I promise I'll wrap up in a minute. And as the mayor said earlier, Wi-Fi and power. Wi-Fi is no good if your phone doesn't have any juice. So to summarize, who? Who are you trying to draw here? What do you want them to do? Make many materials accessible. This is maps. These were things to see. This was a handful of things to do. Make the materials much more accessible. They were buried in the back of the tourist organization. They were there, but they were buried in the back of the room. Think about families with kids, and then consider experiences at all price levels. General consumer experiences and high-end experience. The goal is to create durable, permanent memories. Thank you.
どうもありがとうございました。
Thank you very much, Mr. Wexler. I wished you could go on forever. I'm sorry, but there's a time constraint. But I think you have talked about the essence of Kyoto travel, that everything is there. There are different drawers that you are able to open. And if you open up a drawer, you are able to dive deeper. And you are able to have a quality experience. And those people who bring back those quality experience will be able to communicate by words of mouth. And then we might be able to attract more people by words of mouth. People come to Kyoto for the quality of the experience, and therefore they become the fans of Kyoto. If you start turning that cycle, I think that would be beneficial for Kyoto as a strategy. Thank you very much for your tips. So now we have heard from the 6 panelists. I think one common point that I was able to identify was that tourism nowadays, of course, is not only on shopping, because you can buy anything on the internet nowadays. But I think the spirituality, the sense of beauty, or the 4 seasons, these things that are intangible in nature, I think should be the pillar on which the tourism strategy will be constructed. Of course, if you visit buildings, or if you go buy things, there are places to buy, but tourism to get in touch with the spirituality of the place, I think, is something that is not presented so often. And I think that is something that other cities are not doing, which Kyoto may be able to offer. There was the era of Japanism in 19th century. There was a big boom of Japan because of the spirituality and the way of thinking of the Japanese, which attracted people. And people wanted to mimic Japan. And there was the spirituality that they have paid their attention to in relation to the 4 seasons and the Japanese culture. And I think that was the occasion when things about Japan spread globally. So I think Kyoto may be the city that would have the opportunity to spread culture from the city to the rest of the world, experiencing visitors experiencing the culture. And so I think Ms. Ikenobu, would you like to expand on what you have started saying? As a matter of fact, we have an office in San Francisco, and the office in San Francisco is totally transparent by glass, made of glass, and therefore we exhibit ikebana, and people who pass by would ask us how much would the flowers cost. And we would tell them, ikebana is not something that we sell. We cannot sell, you cannot buy. And so we tell them that bouquet, ordinary bouquet of flowers you're able to buy and sell. However, ikebana is a skill that we transmit to people as an art. And then they would say, you're exhibiting something you're not able to sell. What does that mean? They would reproach us. But I think one of the main characteristics of Kyoto that we would like people to understand is our sense of beauty, the 4 seasons that are to be felt and not something that is visible. But we need to add descriptions and explanations when people come from overseas. What we think is best may not be appreciated as such without these explanations. We might have to tell them what the value of this is and the background and history, which has led to what we present today as values, so that people of different values from overseas may be able to appreciate it better. I talked about experience. I think we cannot relate things all in terms of words, verbally. We may have to ask people to sit and experience using their own senses in order to truly appreciate what we are trying to express. when we try to communicate with ikebana, we also ask them to use their reason as well as their senses to understand the essence of the flower arrangement with their heart. And so that's why we want them to touch the flowers personally. And by touching the flowers and the plants, I am hoping that the people will be able to put them into their own context and relate them with their own experience and add their own interpretation of what the ikebana flower arrangement is. I think that might be effective. Thank you very much. We may have to add explanations verbally and by using words. But I think there is no single pattern of doing that. I think there are different ways of doing it. Reverend Matsuyama, I think you are explaining things about Zen meditation and the Zen sect throughout your activities. So regarding the spirituality or the Zen of Japan, what do you think is important in communicating that properly to the foreign audience? Speaking about Zen in English, sometimes people think that it may be difficult. I don't think so. I train myself by speaking to elementary school students. Now, if I am able to speak as if I'm speaking to a primary school student, I will be successful. Rather than speaking fluent English, I think it is important, first of all, to speak in an intelligible way to primary school students and pupils. As Ms. Ikenobo has also mentioned, first of all, you need to be moved yourself. And you need to feel that exciting yourself. That's important above all. And things that communicate well tends to be quite natural in nature. So about shojin ryori, which eliminates animal proteins from the food, or vegetarian type of food, people sometimes say that they are vegetarian and they wear leather shoes. And so I question them, who are you? So eating vegetables is not eating shojin ryori. I think it's a selfish type of food who tends to say that they only eat vegetables. Shojin ryori is called a shojin because both the side that presents or to offer the food and those who take in the food both need to train themselves. And they need to care about each other and not waste things. That is the essence of what shojin ryori is about. And that's why it has lasted for so long. It has been durable. So if you tell them that essence, people would say, oh, that's the point. And they would understand and appreciate it. So first of all, you need to feel it's exciting yourself. And when you communicate that, it should be something that is reasonable and natural. That is that is the essence of what you need to communicate. Thank you very much. I think another key word is natural. So I think that may be a point that is generating interest about Japan. Not just thinking, is it this or that, but to think more naturally. I think that sort of attitude is attracting attention. So speaking from the traditional culture or traditional industry aspect, Mr. Hoso, could you add your views? So I will now talk with my businessman hat on. Now, we are working on Nishijin fabric. And we have special textiles and fabrics for the luxury consumers abroad. And I noticed that overseas business people would come to us on purpose. And I always question why. We are living in a mature society. It's so in Japan, in Western countries, in Europe, and in the United States. Once you enter the level of the stage of mature society, in the past we were competing by price based on mass production, mass consumption, but that is no longer viable. Today, people who are competing in today's world are competing by creating new values. That is the state of competition that we are facing today. Given that situation, Kyoto has the artisanship and also the artisan spirit. That is very much appreciated by people who are engaging in manufacturing in overseas countries. And I think that is also widely shared as a common value. The other day, in Paris, France, a shoe manufacturer's CEO said that he wanted to come to our studio to see what sort of people are working on the product in what sort of a milieu or space. And so he flew from Paris to Kansai with his private jet, and he parked at the Kansai International Airport, took a car to visit our studio, and flew back to Paris after seeing what was happening at our place. So people like that are increasing. I think it's the trend of the today's era. Perhaps the spiritual aspect of what we can offer from Kyoto may be at the state of, considered as a state of art. We have heard about the words of mouth. I also have a similar experience. Every day, every week, VIPs come to us from the rest of the world. And at the end of December last year, Ambassador Kennedy came to us, and Pharrell Williams, world-famous musician, came to us in spring. We have been visited by the royals of Middle East or from the Netherlands. 4 years ago, the board members of Moët Hennessy, Louis Vuitton came to us in dozens. So when we asked them why they visited us, and the answer was by words of mouth. They wanted to. They were told that they should visit Hoso if they were to visit Kyoto. So the luxury, the deep-pocketed people are creating their own community network, and so they are telling themselves, visit Kyoto, visit Hoso, and then by words of mouth, they would say, I have visited by being recommended by someone that they know. So I think what Mr. Wexler talked about, the kuchikomi or words of mouth, I think is the best type of publicity that we can hope for. Thank you very much. Professor Maegawa, you are studying service economy. I think in terms of the aspect of spirituality and other, so to speak, intangible aspects, I think the Western companies have not really taken that sort of a perspective. But I think from the standpoint of service economy, would you be able to say that the Kyoto-based companies can take advantage of that? I was born in Osaka, actually. I think I hope that Kyoto would remain somewhat closed, as it has been, in order to protect the values. But at the same time, I think we need to think from the qualitative aspect as an academic. And so I would say that, as Mr. Wexler talked about, the couples and deep pocket, as to whom we target is a question. In other words, even if we target students, they don't bring in profit or money. They don't spend so much. And so I think we need to think as to what we are really looking for through these visitors. Making visible something that is invisible are already there, and on the private sector side. So I think it's important to involve the public sector so that we have a system in place that would allow us to analyze the economic benefits of having such visitors. When we debate things in Kyoto, Mr. Hoso, of course, talks about spirituality, but he is a down-to-earth business person as well. And so he deals with both. He can work combining the spirituality aspect with the business reality. So I think that is one of the interesting parts and aspects about the Kyoto-based business. So Mr. Iwai, you said that Kyoto is taking a lot of measures. So when it comes to spirituality and the intangible aspect of it, are you doing something? As Mr. Hoso mentioned, Parasofia is going to be held in March of next year. The whole business community in Kyoto is supporting that. Next year marks the 400th anniversary of the Rimpa Art School, which was developed by the Tokugawas. So although it is an anniversary year of Rimpa, we are going to hold this contemporary art exhibition. And we are all for supporting that event, which is set in contrast to the traditional art. And the museums and art museums are going to cooperate with us. And I think it's quite a new feature that we'll be bringing to the traditional city of Kyoto. I believe we might be able to generate a lot of stimuli through such new activities. I didn't touch upon my own business, but as a matter of fact, I engage in food and beverage as well as the hotel business. We are outsourcing many of our businesses, so we are not having too great a number of non-regular employees, but we do have to work with part-timers as well. We have onsen in Kyoto. 10 years ago, there was a hot spring found in Arashiyama, and Arashiyama has also become a hot spring resort. But in May of this year, we have opened a new hot spring spa, Hatoya Zuihokan, in right next to the Kyoto station. And by having this hot spring, we have been able to see great numbers of foreign visitors stay at our hotel. There is a big boom of onsen, especially people coming from Southeast Asian nations love the onsen. Sometimes people don't know how to take a bath in the Japanese style. There is still a culture gap there, but I think this was the same when Japanese people traveled overseas many, many years ago. So I think sooner or later they would be able to learn the Japanese way of taking bath. But these are the new things that we are trying to engage in. The foreign visitors come to Japan because of the good hospitality. They find the Japanese as being very kind, caring. They are surprised with the automated toilets and the punctuality of the JR lines and the Shinkansen. These are something that we all take for granted, but seen from the foreigners' standpoint, they are quite surprised. There may be some troubles caused by cultural gap, but I think that would lead to new encounters and new learning opportunities for both, I think.
Thank you very much. Hot Spring. I used to be a member of a Hot Spring Society. Yes, indeed, it's a very important tourist attraction. Now, let me turn to Mr. Wexler. Again, spirituality and sense of aesthetics have been mentioned by other speakers. And the something original, something that exists only in Kyoto, what do you think it is? Something that exists or that you can find only in Kyoto?
I think one thing that makes Kyoto such a terrific place to be is the experiences that people have here are true and they're real. They're not manufactured experiences. All the things that I listed out, and I went pretty fast there at the end, but all the things I was listing out are true and real experiences in Kyoto. They aren't imported here. They're not, let's make this here. They have integrity. And I talk about, when I present Ghibli films overseas, I spend a lot of time thinking about maintaining the integrity of the creator's story. It's the same thing in Kyoto. All the experiences I mentioned are based on real things, and they have integrity. And so when you live here or when you visit here, you always feel that you're seeing something real. You never feel that you're seeing something that was made for you as the tourist. And that's very different than some other cities. Even places that have wonderful assets, they manufacture tourist things for tourists, manufacture tourist experiences or tourist feelings. But here and a few other places I've visited, it's all very real. And so you feel honored to experience it and honored to see it. So I think that real, the true integrity of what's here in Kyoto makes it much more appealing than what you find in other places.
ありがとうございます。real という言葉。
Thank you very much. Something real has been repeated by Mr. Wexler. Yes, something real, honmono in Japanese. And this is something we should never lose in Kyoto. Here, the title of the symposium is Japan as a Tourism Nation, what Kyoto can do. And I have to summarize the discussion as a moderator. But I think all of you have mentioned something which converge into the value of something real in Kyoto that should never be lost. And starting from there, what policies can we make? We often look at the commercial side of tourism. We tend to lose sight of something real in integral or integrity, but we shouldn't miss that. Then I think Kyoto continues to have something which appeals to the rest of the world. So this is the beginning of steps toward the 2020 Tokyo Olympics and Paralympics. Those are the things which have to do. And toward that orientation, I hope the policies will be formulated. And then Kyoto is already #1 on the tourist destinations ranking. And I think Kyoto can make a further leap forward when these are realized through policy measures. Anyone who would like to make the last comment? If not, we would like to conclude. Anyone who would like to make the last point? May I? This is a sales pitch, a leaflet. In February next year, there will be a tourism symposium where you will be listening to the presentations by students. I think this is going to be a very interesting tourist seminar, so please do come. Thank you very much. We have indeed listened to so much food for thought. Please give them a big hand of applause. So this concludes the symposium. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Ladies and gentlemen, please stay seated for a while. Panelists, please stay seated on the stage. We will move on to closing remarks. Professor Saito, Director of International Center of Doshisha University, gives closing remarks. Professor Saito, please. Thank you very much. My name is Nobuyoshi Saito with International Center of Doshisha University. So my role here is to give closing remarks. But I'm wondering what is the right message I would like to give in closing this symposium. We started with the keynote speeches and a panel discussion. All of them have given us new ideas and food for thought, their views of the reality and the future perspectives. So much information has been conveyed by the speakers, and I, as a person not knowledgeable enough, have difficulty absorbing and trying to summarize the discussion. So I don't think I can make summation of any way, but please allow me to give you my personal observations or impression as I have listened to the talks. You know, USJI, as has been informed already, is an organization that implements research activities which have some pragmatic values. One, energy and environment. Second, security and safety. And the third is regional integration and cooperation. 3 pillars of studies. And what we believe is important is that our research outcome needs to have some pragmatic values. USIJ is headquartered in Washington, D.C., the seat of the U.S. government. And in Japan, Tokyo is the center of activities where Japanese government is seated. And today, USJI's International Symposium has taken place here in Kyoto with a main theme on tourism. And I think this carries very important implications. In a sense, broadly put, the area of research or policies covered by USIJ may be affected by what we discussed here today. As Professor Egawa, chair of USJI, mentioned, in 2010, USJI held a symposium in Ritsumeikan University here in Kyoto. But today, we were able to have such a wonderful member of panelists and the keynote speakers. This is a fully fledged symposium. And I think in that sense, this symposium today made a very important step forward for USJI. Now, tourism. I am from the Faculty of Literature and Letters. When I think of tourism, I remember a philosopher of Meiji era, Dr. Shigetaka Shiga, who discussed the theory of landscapes in Japan. And according to him, how things in nature become part of the landscape. What transforms things in nature into landscape is the words spoken by a person. And based upon his thoughts, with his intention, he tried to establish Japanese landscapes as part of the Japanese government policies. And I think this is a kind of proposal he tried to make to construct and establish tourism, utilizing Japanese nature and landscapes as tourism resources. In a sense, he was more or less on the right-wing school of thoughts, but he had a certain vision and perspectives in trying to construct a new landscapes which can become a part of tourism resources. And in that sense, he wrote a very important book in the Meiji era. And here in Japan, having Japanese panelists and American panelists, what visions and what sense of values and what strategies can be utilized in order to promote tourism. And participants here today have discussed in a constructive manner with such a force of persuasion, gave us very good ideas. And I have been so much impressed by what I have heard. And I once again learned how ignorant I have been, but I certainly took many notes for tomorrow and further studies. I will continue to learn from what I heard today. So it has been such an interesting and great learning opportunity for me. And I'm sure that the people in the audience have fully enjoyed the meaning and significance of the symposium. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the keynote speakers and all the panelists who have made this symposium such a wonderful opportunity for learning. So in a sense, as a full-fledged symposium, this is the first time for USJI to take place in Kansai, in Kyoto, and I'm indeed so grateful that we have been able to complete this symposium in such a great success. I apologize for my rather sporadic remarks, but with this, I'd like to conclude my closing words. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, all of you, for your kind attention for so many hours. When you leave, please do not forget to return your simultaneous interpretation receivers at the exit. And if you don't mind, please fill out the questionnaire and give it to the staff at the exit. Thank you very much.